Sal, dude, welcome
Uh,
to Thought Criminals.
hey, man. Thanks for having me on, bro. It's always a good time. You know what's funny? So off air, right before we started this, you were saying how sometimes people like they freak out when they see me and you go back in the comments of some of your posts or whatever.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that because it's hilarious to me. First off, I respect the shit out of you, right? So I want people to know this. Like, I respect you. We don't always agree on our opinions on certain topics, but the reason why I respect you, you're genuine. So if somebody's genuine and authentic and they really want to do good, if we disagree, that's okay because we both have similar, root drivers, and you're like that. But also, I respect the fact that you're always open. So me and you can go back and forth, and sometimes we don't agree at all. Sometimes you stay where you're at, I stay where I'm at. Sometimes we kind of move towards a different place, but sometimes we don't, and it doesn't matter. We're cool. It's not a big deal. And I think that is something that needs to happen more. I think people are weird about like disagreeing with other people, and then that's it. We can't ever be friends, and fuck you, and you're Nazi, and this and that. Absolutely ridiculous. It's so silly. Like I know you and I can do that,
Yeah.
and then we have a good time, and it's okay, and big deal. We disagree. Who gives a shit? Like I would be bored if everybody agreed with me all the time.
Well, yeah, and I've had to explain that 'cause somebody asked about it on the Patreon one time, and I was doing a premium episode, and I was like, no, we just know each other well enough that it's like especially when I type things out, I come off way more dickish than in real life.
Sure.
But that's super common. Like I watched a debate between Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks and Ben Shapiro, who I think both of those people are self-righteous douchebags in their own right. But it was one of the most civil conversations I've ever seen. But if you hear Anna on Young Turks talking about Ben, or Ben on the Daily Wire talking about Anna,
Yep.
they're straight savages. But when you get them in a room together, I was like, oh, this is what we need, But you and I think it's like you and I talk like we're in the car together on a road trip, like arguing about some shit, and via text that comes off very aggressive. But I'm like, no, we love each other, dude. It's all good.
Yeah,
We're
it
just
is
going back and forth.
It totally is. I know you're not a bad person, so I don't mind that your opinion is different to mine. It's not a big deal. I wish people would do that more. And also, I can be annoying in the sense that I think things out that way. Like one of my favorite ways of thinking out complex, challenging topics and issues is by debating, discussing, or even arguing with people who have a difference of opinion, who are smart and who can do this with me, who aren't so afraid of the discussion that they run away or they call me names and then, whatever. I tend to think things out that way. It never really bothered me. I never had a fear of doing that, but we're in a weird climate now where if you disagree with somebody, you're bad people. The other side isn't just wrong. The other side is evil, which I think is fundamentally wrong.
Yeah.
I think that's a very dangerous. This is, by the way, I believe that to be one of the most dangerous political, I guess, tools or methods that I've ever seen. And it started a long time ago. It started, I don't know, I want to say probably I first started noticing this maybe 15 years ago or so, where it wasn't just that the Republicans weren't just saying that the Democrats were wrong and vice versa. It was, they're not just wrong, they're evil. And you don't debate or discuss with someone who's evil. Like, I'm not going to say, if you're an evil person, I don't care about your opinion. I just want you to be gone because you're evil, right? But it's not like that. Half the country is not evil. The vast majority of people want the same stuff. They just disagree on how to get there. And there's this fundamental kind of disagreement. And if you think the other person is evil, what we're going to end up with is a free society that's going to collapse and crumble, because there are some fundamental foundational things that we have to maintain. What was that quote? I forgot who said it. It was one of the founding fathers. Like, it's a republic if you can keep it, or something, when they asked them.
Yeah, it was Ben Franklin, I think.
Yes. Which is true, right? Like, just because we're free doesn't mean everything goes great. What it means is we have this tremendous responsibility. And the responsibility is that we have to value discourse and debate, especially in a very diverse country. There's a lot of free, nowadays, right? There's a lot of countries that could be labeled more on the free side. Mm-hmm. But one of the unique things about America is we're super diverse. So like the difference between like Sweden and the US, for example, in this case, is like Sweden, very homogenous. Everybody kind of looks the same, lots of similar culture, lots of similar opinions, for example. I'm picking Sweden just out of my hat or whatever, right? America is like lots of religions, lots of belief systems, lots of different, nationalities and races and cultures blending and mixing together. And so it's like, how do we all work together? Well, we have to agree on this one fundamental thing, which is like we believe in our speech, and we believe in discourse, and we believe in our democracy. You have to have those three things, because once we start to lose, and we're starting to lose faith in those three things. Once we lose that, then freedom becomes tyranny really fucking fast. It becomes
it happens faster than anything else. You know, like Xi Jinping said this about about democracies in general. He was like, they're too divided and they're too slow moving. That's a pro-authoritarian argument, which honestly, there's some truth to that in a lot of ways, but that's also good.
Yes.
Right? Because fast-moving societies, it can get real tyrannical real quick too. But it's that slip happens so fast. It's like nothing happens quickly, and then it seems like it goes to tyranny and 0-60 real quick.
It does. And if you look at our country, for example, if you look at the two major parties that kind of run things or whatever, the times that they agree and get along and say we need to do something, like pay attention to those times. Some of the worst shit happens when that happens. Like, when they tend to agree? War. It's almost like they always agree on war. It's insane.
I'm politically homeless because I can't support a pro-war party.
It's just insane. I mean, that's a big one for me too, right? Like, the most recent one that I can, my opinion is most wars are built off of false, I guess pretenses and bullshit. Most of them, right? There are some that are justified, and I'm not saying that, I'm not a utopian, right? I get that the reality.
World War II is pretty justified.
Yeah, and I get the reality of the world, right? But many of the ones that we've engaged in, they were based on false fears, and here's an obvious. This one's easy, right? Iraq.
Yeah,
they had nothing to do with September 11th. Nothing. Zero.
No, the Saudis had more to do with it than the Iraq did.
Oh, way too logical, Connor. You're being way too logical now, right? There was
but if I would have said that in a public forum in 2002, I would have gotten booed off the stage.
Booed completely, right? I remember only one politician major politician was opposing it and would get booed. Like, you're not American, you don't support. Now, why? We were all scared. We had this crazy thing that happened, which, what government does very well, or anybody in power, it doesn't have to be government, it could be any kind of, powerful figure. Whenever an emergency happens, what a wonderful time to take advantage of people. And because they're easy to manipulate, right? When they're scared. September 11th happened. Very scary. I remember I just got back from this was my first marriage, back from my honeymoon. We, woke up in the morning. Holy shit. Everybody's talking about what's going on. I watched the second tower collapse. Immediately you want retribution. You want to fight back. Who's it? And so you have this fear. Oh my God, it's going to happen again. And okay, Afghanistan, you could make a case for invading Afghanistan. I don't think you could have made a case for occupying it forever. I think that's hindsight now is very clear. Yeah. But Iraq, why? You know why? We've wanted to invade Iraq forever, and they look like, they're in the Middle East, so they look kind of similar. Oh yeah, remember Iraq? Remember bad Saddam Hussein? Let's go in there and invade them. Like,
what percentage of Americans, if you showed them a map of the Middle East, could point out Iraq and Afghanistan? And it's like where could somebody find Ukraine on a map? Speaking of which, today, it's like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? We've done this so many. It's like somebody said we need to be gearing up for unconventional warfare. That was like a mainstream take. I think it was on MSNBC, which is employs a bunch of CIA operatives and who else. But I said that, and I was like, when have we ever been good at unconventional warfare?
Yeah.
Like we're really good at conventional warfare. Like if we were to have an all-out war with China, like that's a toss-up maybe. Yeah. But Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, we're terrible at it. We've lost every one that we've ever gotten into. So why would we go get into another unconventional war halfway across the world over? I guess it does protect our economic interests, but Ukraine right now is telling Russia and U.S. to calm the fuck down.
Yep. Yeah. By the way, nobody's good at unconventional war. The Soviets couldn't figure out Afghanistan either before we went there.
Well, neither could Alexander the Great.
Nobody could.
It's not a thing that happens.
No, and now why is it? People mistake in war and they say, like, for example, you talk about Americans being the most armed society in the world, right? So we have the Second Amendment. Lots of Americans have guns. And then people make the argument, the pro-Second Amendment side, the Second Amendment exists to oppose tyranny, okay? And then you have the anti-Second Amendment side, which is like, stupid, the U.S. government's got jets and machine guns and bombs. What are your AR-15s going to do? Well, okay. What are they going to do, blow everything up? Like wipe out the whole country? Yeah. You know how hard it is, obviously, to win that kind of a war when you don't know who the clear enemy is, and the more you kill, the stronger you make their will and the determination to fight you, because that's the whole point, is to fight tyranny. Like, it's an unwinnable pain in the ass. So they're not winnable to begin with. But yeah, you bring up the Ukraine. That's it's funny. So I was talking with the guys, and this was not that long ago. I forgot what I saw. Oh, I watched. There was on CNN. There was a clip with a doctor talking about how big of a waste of time cloth masks were.
Mm-hmm.
Right. This was recent. Oh my God.
The CNN contributor. Forget her name, but yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So she said that. Then there was some other stuff that came out, and I said, "Oh shit!" I sat down with the guys. I said, "The narrative is changing." I said, "Omicron came out, super mild, and people are just over it. They're sick of all the lockdowns and the forced this and the mandates, and people are not afraid like they used to be." I said, "Pay attention to what's going to happen." And the current administration is super unpopular. I said, "Watch what happens. They have to figure out another way to get us to be afraid before the midterms." And I swear to God, I said this. I said to the guys, I said, they're going to come up with a foreign threat because that always gets everybody behind the current administration. And sure enough,
it's straight out of the playbook, dude. It was so easy to call. It was clear as day.
Every time, right? Sure enough, we're talking about some shit that's been happening for a while, by the way. Okay. Yeah. And the Ukraine president's like, you guys are politicizing this. We're not going to go to war with Russia. We didn't go to war with them when they invaded Crimea. We didn't go. You know why? Because we're both nuclear armed. There's not war. There's no war. At best, there'll be a proxy. Maybe we'll give weapons to someone or whatever. At best, it's not going to happen. This is all political. Scare the shit out of Americans. Get back in line.
I like how they're calling weapon sales lethal aid.
Yeah,
it's only aid. It's just lethal aid. Like, what are we talking about here?
I don't know, man.
But yeah, Obama said. I mean, and for all of Obama's faults, which there are many, like he looked at that and said, like, what's the point? Like, there's not like we're not gonna like when Russia. That's when Russia took Crimea. It was like, okay, you know, and there are a lot of people in Ukraine. In the same way, there's a lot of people in Afghanistan that were on the side of the Taliban. There's a lot of people in Ukraine that want to be part of Mother Russia. You know, very like Russian nationalist Ukrainians, and that's. Well, we don't know what it's like over. Like the USSR was a very powerful and in some ways popular organization.
Yeah, and
in some ways it was incredibly tyrannical, and Ukraine bore the brunt of much of that. Too.
Oh boy, they starved them out. That was, I mean, you look at the starvation that happened in Ukraine when
10 million people or something like that.
They were cannibal. They were practicing cannibalism. It's really terrible if you read about it. But I mean, okay, let's look at the picture, the whole truth here. And I can be very critical of our, I'm patriotic, by the way, in the sense that I'm not America at all costs. I'm the founding principles, the founding principles of this country, which we have never exerted perfectly, but they do exist. That's what I'm always supportive of.
I think it's important to say that, to that caveat of like, from day one, there were issues upholding the principles, right? Like, there was a lot going on. I mean, from slavery on, right?
Let's be honest.
A lot of things, issues there. Yeah.
Yes, but it was those concepts that allow us to move fast and grow and fight within ourselves and do that. So it's these beautiful concepts that exist that have been now intertwined with, America, right? The founding of America. And that's what I support. Not the America at all costs, but rather those founding principles. So I'm going to be very critical now of something that we're doing, right? We're painting Russia and Putin as this aggressor in this particular situation. By the way, I'm not defending Putin. I think he's a tyrant in many different ways. But let's be honest. We have treaties. We have NATO treaties surrounding Russia. This is a big deal.
And we also said we weren't going to do that.
We said we weren't going to do that. We did, and part of that treaty is if any of those NATO countries gets invaded, everybody jumps in. So you got Russia, which fell from grace, right? One of the world's superpowers, gone, still nuclear armed, still wants some respect, and we're surrounding them with NATO countries, isolating them, so. It's not like he's just being crazy. I think part of it is like, oh, Ukraine's on our border. Like, we don't want them to go to NATO too. And now what are we going to do? Like, we're completely surrounded. I mean, I get that, right? I kind of get that. But yeah, no, this is being used right now to get the sheep back in order. I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody, but it's what's happening. They got to drum up more fear because especially a foreign threat always gets everybody behind the current administration. And they're very unpopular right now.
I think it works less and less every time. And I watched. Have you seen that show, The Americans? Underrated show, incredible show.
Really? Okay,
dude. So it's about it's definitely like Hollywoodized.
This is during the Cold War, right?
It's in the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
Russian illegals living in the United States. They come
Oh.
over as like young people, live as Americans. They take over identities of dead kids that had
Wow.
died early, and just like have insiders to get the. But it's crazy. But one thing that they said, and one thing that show does incredibly well, and I've talked about it on every episode of Thought Criminals I've done so far. But I just finished it up, and I watched the first 2 seasons when it first came out, and then just recently went back and watched them all with Kelly. And one thing it does is it doesn't paint America or Russia as like clear black and white bad, right? It kind of puts them on the like the FBI agents who are pursuing, like they're doing shady shit. You know, the Russians are doing shady shit. It's or the Soviets. But one thing that she said, one of the illegals said as they were having a discussion was about World War II, right? And we got to look at that because we don't have the context fully from their perspective. We lost, what was it, 100,000, a couple 100,000 people at most.
Oh, the Soviets lost more than anybody.
27 million.
Yeah, more than anybody.
27 million people. Can you imagine? And like the Soviets, that's not a huge population. And of course, hundreds of thousands is terrible too, but you got to think that's mostly men.
Oh yeah.
Mostly young men that completely decimated like generations of people. Like that sets a framework for a much different reality than what we experience. And I even say this, like, and I've gone as far as this, like, I think the United States helped Russia and Europe win World War II, but the United States didn't. We always come out as like, we won, like we're the winners. We were on the winning side, but we were like a supporting role in that whole situation. And it looks like even like Stalingrad was a much bigger turning point than the beaches of Normandy, right? Like there's different situations. We don't ever look at it from that perspective.
The Soviets beat the Nazis.
Yes,
you know, the Soviets and the Russian winter is what beat the Nazis. We get a lot of the attention because we dropped 2 nukes on Japan, which solidified our power, right? Like we've got these weapons. We're
2 unnecessary nukes at that.
You know, that's a tough argument. You know, I had a discussion with a friend of mine who's a bit of a historian in war, and I'm so anti-war, right, that it's really hard for me to justify anytime you kill so many people, use these terrible weapons. I'm very, very anti-war, but I always try to be pragmatic as well. And so he explained to me, he said, we would do these incendiary raids over Japanese cities where we would drop these fire bombs, and
it would just set the whole place on fire,
and you would kill so many people. And the Japanese had so much resolve. They didn't give up. They were not going to give up. He said they would like kamikaze us. They in the Pacific. They would, attach bombs to the end of sticks and run them into people and blow up. And he's like, the thought was, we need to use overwhelming force to end this war. Otherwise, they're going to fight to the very end. And so that was the strategy. So I kind of get that. Of course, on the flip side, we dropped. And this was all World War II. This is the era before smart bombs and whatever, right? Everybody was dropping bombs on just cities. So lots of civilians.
It changed it because there was a time where we were committed to not doing that.
Yeah.
Not bombing civilians. And then that World War II changed all of that because that warfare changed.
Totally. But, we dropped 2 nukes. We got that technology. Of course, the Soviets got it afterwards. Now, here's the other side of that, right? Let's pretend for a second that nuclear weapons were never created or invented, okay? We probably would have ended up in a massive, massive war with the Soviets at some point. It was the nukes that the fear of mutual destruction that prevented us from going to war. Yeah. So it's one of those weird double-edged swords, I guess.
Yeah, but it's hard to say that many people needed to die, and then generations too. From all, it's like that just to make a point or to flex on another. It's weird. I don't know. I feel like the missile test did a pretty adequate job of helping people understand what those things are capable of.
Dude. Well,
it's strange, and how close it was to happening numerous times.
Dude,
like if JFK would have done what the intelligence community wanted him to done, there were already nukes in Cuba. Like the Cubans, they were already there, and they thought that the intelligence was bad. And there was another example of a nuclear submarine that was carrying nuclear weapons that got a bad signal and almost launched those into the United States. It's like there's so many little things that just like one person's decision making and apprehension saved us from a nuclear war.
Totally. And we look at times now, and not to trivialize the challenges we have now, but boy, did we forget, like how quickly we forget how close we were to total annihilation during the Cold War. It was very, very close. Now, what stopped a lot of that was, well, first of all, the threat of mutual destruction, and Ronald Reagan and Gorbachev talking to each other, like, come on, have we not learned anything? It's funny about today, because we are, I guess, ideologically completely opposed to communism, right? So capitalism, communism, they tend to be put on two sides of the spectrum. But the threat from China is nothing compared to the threat from the Soviets, not because China's weak. They have nukes too. They have a big military, huge population, but rather because we trade so much with China.
Mhm.
Like one of the number one, historically, this is a fact, one of the number one promoters of peace in all of history is whether or not two nations trade. Like when we trade, it's like, okay, we want things to work out. And I think that's the position that we need to take, because what you have is we have ideologies. There's a moral argument, there's an ideological argument, and then you have to mix pragmatism in there. Because if you go too ideological, too moral, then you throw pragmatism out the window and you get bad results. You end up, cut your nose off to spite your face or whatever.
Yeah.
You end up with worse situation. So, okay, ideologically and morally, communism bad, telling, they can't speak. If they speak out, they get thrown in jail. They probably have their own concentration camps. They're oppressing certain ethnic groups in China. For all intents and purposes, Americans would be just blown away by how tyrannical it is over there versus over here, although it's less controlled than the people were in the Soviets still, for us. And then for them, they could think the same way. Americans, they don't want to work together, or they're not all united under this whatever. And we can do that ideological, moral argument type of thing. And so if we want to be super ideological and moral, we could say, you know what? Fuck the communists, never trade with them. Don't do business with them until they're like us, or until they get rid of these laws against speech, or until they do whatever. Like, we could do that. And I could see the ideological, moral consistency of that, right? Pragmatic and a good idea, no. You just took us 5 steps closer to war. Like, the best thing we could do is trade with them.
There's a great example of that in Cuba. Like, what happened with Cuba was exactly that on a small scale, and because Cuba's such a small country. But the United States was exploiting the fuck out of Cuba. Like, they were taking a ton of wealth out of Cuba, and Castro was like, we're nationalizing a handful of these industries, right? Sugar industry, oil and gas. And that pissed off the Americans, of course, right? And they said, okay, well, we're not going to trade with you anymore, right? Because now you're getting too close to, well, all that did was push them to the Soviets.
Yep. Right.
So it says, hey, a small island nation like that has is as mineral rich, as long as they don't do what Venezuela did, could probably run on like a democratic socialist situation. And I don't think Castro was. I actually have a lot of respect for Castro, just after hearing his stories and how much he just flexed on the CIA constantly after 80 assassination attempts. Like, he's just a very charismatic, interesting person. Of course, he did get tyrannical, and he has been, but it was like looking at the history of it. It's interesting to see like how we pushed them right into the arms of the Soviets, because we just said, well, we're not going to buy your sugar anymore because it's nationalized.
Well, I mean,
that makes no sense.
We made Iran what they are now. You ever look at pictures of Iran in the 1960s and 70s?
Beautiful, dude.
Oh yeah.
Like, the architecture is stunning.
Yeah. Women were doctors and bikinis on the beach, and people were free. It was one of the freest countries in the Middle East, right? We put our little puppet leader there and, exploited them. It was perfect, ripe for fundamentalism to grow. Patriotism mixed with fundamentalism is a very dangerous combination.
Yeah.
Which is why
nationalism, I'd say, more than patriotism.
Sorry, that's the right term. Which is why I told you, and we can get to this also. Why I said to you, what I'm worried about right now, because we're starting to see a swing to the right. The right, although currently I feel is far less of a danger to people's liberties and freedoms and way of life than the left is at the moment. If the right has power, they're very dangerous, because they do their ideology is wrapped in nationalism, and that is attractive to a lot of people, and it makes people do really, really bad things. And if they do a really good job of wrapping the two together, especially under the climate of fear or resentment, not a good situation. It's not a situation I would be in.
But the Democrats have I would say, like, the liberals, which is that term makes no sense anymore for what it used to mean, but they don't do a great job of keeping them in check. Like, we've talked about this, and you do a great job of sending me stuff. Like, I guess you get in a mood. You send me stuff that I already knew. You send me stuff that's like, this is happening, and I'm like, yeah, dude, I know. It's like that's like me texting you and being like, hey man, gut health is really important. I'm like, good.
Hey, send me stuff, man. I don't care. It's a good time.
I'm just giving you a hard time. But no, we look at this, and but I understand. I say that to say, like, I understand the frustration of living in the Bay Area right now. You know what I mean? Like, and I was like, I think it's rotting your brain, because we're over here, and we have a Jared Polis. I'm not a huge fan, but he came out months ago and was like, we're not doing statewide mask mandates anymore. And now, of course, Boulder and Denver and Jefferson County, which I live in, had mask mandates. In Jefferson County, which is like golden, it's a little bit more purple. Like nobody really, nope.
Yeah.
We just walk in, we just walk past the signs. Like no one cares, you know. And I feel bad for people who, like the working class people have to work there. They're all masked, which I think is gross and unfair and rude to people who have been fucked over the most in this whole situation. But one of the things that I think is an issue is this like unchecked power. That's why I love purple states.
Yeah.
I like Colorado because it's like, well, if you fuck up as a Democrat, the opposite party is going to win.
Yeah. You know,
that never happens in California.
No, you know, it's weird. So here's why I completely agree with you. Because when the right is in power and they're the ones doing the bad shit,
super majority power, like unilateral power.
Yeah, like let me be clear, okay? Both parties in power act like assholes, okay?
Yes.
When one party is in power, the other party sounds very rational and says a lot of good stuff. And then when the other one comes into power, oh, no, these guys are fucking stupid. Put these guys in charge. And then these guys are down here. Now these guys all of a sudden start doing the same shit. And then these guys now start to make a lot of sense.
That's why the midterms always swing the opposite direction of the party in power.
Always. Almost every single time.
Almost every single, unless you have a super majority, then it goes down to like a bare majority. But you always lose seats.
You do. And I remember the Bush era. And, you know, when Bush was in power and, you know, especially after September 11th and we were past the Patriot Act and NDAA, it was liberty destroying. I mean, people don't even realize how bad, and they're still active, how bad those acts are and what they've done, the precedent that they've sent. Like, for example, every electronic piece of communication now gets collected by the government, and you don't need a court or judge or jury to do any of that, and they can look at it and spy. We know this, that they're doing. It's like they're going through your mail or eavesdropping, which they couldn't do before without a court order. And there's much, much more to it. But when he was doing that, Senator Obama was like railing against it. He's a constitutional lawyer, anti-liberty. We need, due process. We can't be doing this. He was against the war, sounded very rational, very good, loved him. Bush was evil, terrible, true. Obama gets in power, signs the fucking Patriot Act and NDAA back in because it came up for renewal, did the same shit, drone bombing people, doing the same, sounded better, obviously was much more eloquent and charismatic than Bush, but did the same shit. And it's like that happens every time. They do this like this little switcheroo, and you're like, oh yeah, they were saying all this good stuff. Now that we gave them some power, they're gonna do that. They don't. It's it's so frustrating. That's why I'm looking at the swing right now. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, like part of me's happy because they're sending a signal to, there's certain things that are signals that are being sent to politicians right now. Like these are unpopular. We're not going to stand for this. So there's some stuff that's changing that I think is good. But do I think that the Republicans are going to take over and then like do much different? No. I know. I've seen it too many times. They're going to do the same shit.
Yeah, we've all seen this story. I mean, like I said, 35. You're quite a little older than me. You've seen a couple more administrations as like somebody who can comprehend what's going on. Like I really came to understand the power of the presidency through George W. Bush.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's really, I was listening to Rush Limbaugh in the Bush administration.
Yeah.
When I was working in oil and gas construction.
Oh, wow,
that was a different, and it's funny because I swung so far. I mean, I didn't swing that far to the left. Like I was always kind of a pro 2A guy. I was a Texas liberal. It's a different cut of.
It's not a California liberal.
It's like a California Republican.
Yeah,
like it's a little bit different. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Or like a California liberal is a whole different ballgame because you see things that are different, right? Like growing up in the oil and gas industry, I could say like, hey, this is a dirty fucking business.
Yeah.
Necessary. I understand more about fracking than most people on TV that are talking about fracking.
Yeah.
I've actually like been a part of fracking wells before. You know what I mean? And understand, like, and my granddad who raised me in that, like, was super honest about what that was and how that worked and the downfalls. And he's like, casing always leaks. Yeah. Like wherever there's a pipeline, it always leaks. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and it's a fucking disaster when it does. And I've seen the downside of that when you have saltwater leaks that kill like everything, and nothing grows back for 30 years.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like oil grade saltwater is crazy. So yeah, I mean, I see that stuff and I think about those things differently but I'm so grateful I grew up in that world and then still consider myself on the left, which is frustrating. But the reason is I remember I grew up with the Republicans being anti-gay marriage and like so anti-freedom in so many ways. Yeah. And now to hear them be like, we're the party of freedom, and Charlie Kirk and these fucking assholes saying that shit, I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, there is not a party of freedom. Libertarians, I think libertarians have gaping blind spots and they don't they don't play with others well. That's one thing that frustrates me about libertarians.
They're lunatics. That
like,
party is so crazy. And the problem with libertarians is that they sometimes they throw pragmatism out the window because it's all about liberty. And so you get to the point, if you do that, if you take that to its logical conclusion, you become an anarcho-capitalist. Then you believe no government at all, which, let's be honest, if there were no government at all, that's tyranny, because now you have the strongest guy with
warlords.
the biggest guns.
It's Afghanistan.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
That would be terrifying. I mean, what's the guy's name? Mark something. I forget the guy's name. He's been on Rogan before.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can't think of his name.
But it's like, it seems like it's performance art.
Yeah.
That's what it seems like. It's like this. I'm just going to say outlandish things that kind of make sense and can resonate with like a certain fringe community that are fun. But it's like, it's not, I just can't take these people serious.
No, you need to, that's where the pragmatic aspect comes in. Like Milton Friedman is one of my heroes, right? Him, Thomas Sowell is another hero of mine. I love the way that they presented things. They're very pragmatic. You could say they definitely are closer to libertarian than maybe your typical Republican, definitely. But they're not like way extreme. They understand that there's certain things that are done better in particular ways. We have to look at the actual consequences, not just the feelings behind certain things. Like, for example, I'm going to touch a third rail here, but I know a lot of there's a huge segment of the conservative side of politics, or even Republicans, that are very anti-abortion. Now, I get where they come from, because they believe you're killing a baby. They think there's a soul right away. If you believe that, that's a very consistent logic to say you're killing a baby. I get that. Okay, I totally get that. So I'm not going to argue that side to a Republican. But here's the part or to someone that supports that. Here's the part that that they don't consider. You got to look at the pragmatic, like, what are the actual effects of banning something like this? You're going to create a massive black market in abortion, and the side effects of which are going to be worse than the effects that we currently have with legalized medical abortion, right? So it's like the war on drugs. Exactly. With the war on drugs, I could very easily, right, ideologically, morally, you can argue heroin is bad for you, cocaine's not good, and 100%. Like, I'm not going to argue that. I get that for the most part, or for a large part, it could cause serious problems, whatever. Okay, I get that. But banning them outright, all it did was create this tremendous black market with far worse results. So the feelings of the policy are good, or behind it, no, we got to do this thing because it's the right thing to do, pass this law. Nobody pays attention to the consequences. Now, on the flip side, the left does the same thing. They will pass a policy that, this is going to help poor people because it's going to give them more money. We're going to pass this law. But then they don't look at the actual economic consequences. Like, for example, rent control, right? We're going to pass a law that controls rent in a particular city. That way people can afford to continue living in their places and whatever. But the consequence of that, which nobody discusses, and you can discuss whether or not this is a consequence you want to pay, but the consequence of which is no more investment into building new spaces and apartments and buildings. And so you actually shrink the supply. Yeah. And you actually start to make it even more expensive. Or you have a situation where in rent-controlled areas, you ain't going to find an apartment. People just like, I'm fucking living here for 15 years or 20 years, and nobody wants to build anymore. Even though there is a signal there that says if you built more, people would move in. You can't, because you can't afford, it doesn't cost, or the cost of the rent doesn't support the investment, and so nobody builds. So, that's one silly example, but I think when we have these discussions, you think to yourself, okay, morally, I know this is where I stand. Ideologically, this is right. But what's the actual result of this? Even though I may disagree with this particular, maybe what's behind this policy, like, okay, I might be anti-abortion, but is passing a law banning it going to stop them, or is it going to make things worse? And that's a tough thing for people to reconcile, because you don't want to look at the consequence. You want to look at what's motivating it. That's what's most important, which it shouldn't be. It should always be the effect. What's the effect that's happening? That's the way we should pass laws and legislation.
When I did this, I did a segment on something to think about on Politically Homeless about this. I said, if you can't explain to me the unintended consequences of whatever you want to do, then I'm not interested in hearing your plan.
That's good.
And it is what it is. It's like, you should be, that's accountability. That's like basic accountability.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I know, for example, we talked about elk hunting earlier. Like, I want to take all of September off. I'm going to travel, do 2 or 3 states. It's my dream. I've wanted to do this since I was a kid. And the consequences of that, one, it's a life, I'm making memories. I'm with amazing people. I'm doing a thing. And also I put my Patreon on hold, so I lose money.
Yeah.
At least my sponsorship. It's like, there's consequences to that thing. Is
Right.
it worth it to me? Like I have to make that decision for myself.
Yep.
And the actually kind of spun it on conservatives the other day, because we had this liberal, it's like 4 white women from Boulder and Denver mostly.
Yeah.
We're trying to outlaw mountain lion hunting out here in Colorado. So we have a mountain lion that cruises by our house, right? I caught him on a trail camera the other day.
Wow.
Big cat too.
Oh, that's cool.
And my buddy had just shot a big cat, right? So they allot tags, and you have conservation management people that dole these tags out, right? And they did the same thing with the spring bear season. They got rid of it because it makes shooting bears and cats, bobcats, things like that, make people pretty uncomfortable, more than elk and deer and stuff like that. But the whole thing makes people uncomfortable. And the majority, like if you were to pure democracy, right? I think they said the poll was like 72% of people are against mountain lion hunting.
Mm-hmm.
But 72% of people don't live in areas where they have to deal with mountain lions. I have guns staged at every door of my house, not for intruders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are different guns elsewhere, right? They're all so I can let my dogs go take a piss at night.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, that's where we're at from bears and cats. And I flipped it around. I'm like, I know it makes you uncomfortable to think about someone treeing a mountain lion with dogs and shooting it out of a tree. That said, they don't self-regulate. They do what they're the biggest killers of elk herds. Our economy, much of the economy, especially in the fall, is based on people hunting this state. Like a tag, if you wanted to come out here and hunt elk, it's going to cost you $700 just for a tag, right? And thousands of people do that every year. Not to mention all these other, like not mountain towns, but like these rural towns that have hotels. All these people are like relying on a healthy population of animals here, and wolves, bears, cats, like all those things. They don't have a season. They just knock these things out all year long. And it may make you uncomfortable to think about that, but the conservation effort, the people who are running who are saying this many you can take this many out of this area, yada, yada, yada. They're doing that to maintain healthy populations.
Yep.
Not to wipe them out. And they have this skewed perception. And I was like, just like conservatives don't like to think about the uncomfortable reality that is abortion. It is uncomfortable and necessary to have pragmatic laws. That's why I call myself like pragmatic pro-choice. I think there probably should be a cutoff date in like this 14, 15, 16 weeks, like something where it's like you've had enough time to make your decision, because you usually don't find out you're pregnant until like 8 weeks or 6 weeks anyways. So those 6 weeks laws, like in Texas, that just basically deputized like a bunch of activists, are terrible. It's going to clog the judicial system. It's fucked up.
Yeah. And you know what?
Like it's also third trimester abortions that's terrifying. And like, it just seems like that's not debatable either side, because these people think that an embryo has a soul. And I'm like, well, there's like tens of thousands of those in a freezer where I'm doing IVF.
Yeah.
So is that whole thing full of frozen souls? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, that's a really tough one, right? It's a really tough one, but you're 100% right. It's, life is really messy and complex. And so you can't possibly live it. Maybe for yourself you can. I think that's the problem, right? What you were talking about with the conservationists. I think there's this fundamental problem with some of their, I guess, beliefs around people. Like they view us completely as a cancer. People are bad. We're a cancer that needs to be eradicated from the earth. Look at all the bad stuff that we did.
So hang on a second with the conservationists. I want to clear this up just because this term is important. Like I would consider a conservationist somebody who works like in conservation, which includes the healthy management of animal populations.
Yes.
Whereas I would say like an activist. Like
my bad.
An activist. Yeah.
My bad. No, you're absolutely not. Yeah, my mistake. Yeah. So I'm talking about the activists who are against, like what you were talking about in that particular situation. They tend to view humans as such a cancer that we do anything to the environment at all, it's bad. If we kill an animal, it's wrong. They forget that we're humans, that we're our own, I guess, selves, that life is a little messy. Like we're going to cause some damage. We're going to have to control, like we live here. This is how it works. It's not good that, a lot of these people are like, we need to kill half the human population. I've heard people say that. Oh, there's too many people on earth. More people solve more problems. More people are more innovative. If there's no people, nobody can enjoy or observe kind of what's around us. But it's not clear, black or white. It's very, very complex and messy. And, the conversation about unintended consequences, kind of goes right to that. One of my favorite exercises is to look at laws or positions that seem so obvious that nobody looks at the unintended consequences, but then looking at the unintended consequences and then realizing, holy shit, that's not really necessarily a good thing to do. Like I'll give you an example.
Affirmative action in California is one of those.
Well, let's get there. But I'll give you one that like I'll give you one right now that people are going to be like, huh? Right? So like children working in factories. Okay. Oh, I think everybody watching this is probably in a society wealthy enough to think to themselves that that's fucking terrible. We don't want a 10-year-old or a 9-year-old working 10 hours a day in a hot factory or whatever. So let's imagine then that you're a leader of a wealthy nation. Let's say you're the U.S. You go to this third world country, you see these factories, and you say, you know what, this is wrong. These 9-year-olds should not be working in this factory. So you tell the president of said country, and you say, look, here's the deal: shut these down, or we're going to invade you. Okay, we're gonna make sure that you get dethroned because this is wrong. And so they say, okay, fine, you guys, we'll shut these factories down, and then we leave it alone, not realizing that those 9 and 10-year-olds now are prostituting, homeless, starving, right? So, is it good that children work in factories? No, but why? And what happens if we just go and shut them down without considering the unintended consequences? For example, with abortion, first off, why don't we make birth control over the counter? Makes no sense why you got to see it. Make it super accessible. Okay, that'll solve some of it. But there's still.
I go that far as say, like, I think pregnancy tests are so cheap. Just you should be able to just go grab one, like whatever. You know what I mean? It's like they're so cheap to make. Like we spent so much money on COVID stuff. It's like, dude, if you have and then I'm sure there's places, but it's like you should be able to go to CVS and be like, hey, I don't have any money, but I need a pregnancy test.
Yes,
like those are the people who need it.
Yes, I I agree with you. Birth control, Plan B. By the way, like a lot of these happen to poor, kind of underprivileged people. They're in bad situations or whatever. Oftentimes they're multiple, so it's not just one, but they have 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And so, okay, birth control, over the counter, Plan B, over the counter, or behind. What should it say? Behind the counter with the pharmacist, but no doctor required. You go up, hey, I'd like the Plan B, no problem. Here you go, not a big deal. But still, we're going to have some unwanted pregnancies. If we really believe that it's wrong to kill, to abort because it's killing a baby, if you really believe that, then what you're doing is you're providing attractive solutions for this poor young girl or whoever doesn't want to have this baby. You are helping them. You're saying to them, look, here's the deal. I know you want to do this. We believe it's wrong. If you have this baby, here's what we're going to do for you. We're going to take care of, we're going to make sure we have this family. You're going to get taken care of. We're going to make sure you're compensated. We're going to send you education. We're going to cover something to help solve that when that happens. Not just it's illegal and now have this flourishing black market where people are getting black market abortions and terrible things are happening. It's just, that's the more pragmatic thing.
The rich 15-year-old girl who gets pregnant, their family's going to go on a ski trip to some liberal state, and they're going to get it, and it's going to be under. No one will ever know about it. You know what I mean? Like it's the poor people who always bear the brunt of this. And I get frustrated whenever conservatives say they're pro-life. Like I was like, well, you're anti-abortion, but I would never say with the wars that you guys have supported, I would never venture to say that you're pro-life. Like there's kids that it's unquestionable that 3-year-old or those kids that got blown up in the drone strike in Afghanistan there at the end, those 8 kids. Like that's unquestionable that those kids were alive and had a soul, but we had to have a show of force.
Yeah,
and we killed an aid worker.
Yeah,
since we're
hammering on conservatives, I'll join in on something else that annoys me a little bit about them. Is this like, and you see this with liberals too, in some sense. Actually, both sides will do this a little bit, but conservatives tend to be more about this, which is like the American workers, like fuck everybody else, American workers, right? Because we need to those are also people over there. So when we bring work over there, we're also helping other people. Now we could talk about the economic benefits and the innovation and actually how there's definitely consequence, but there's also lots of potential benefits for everybody, including especially the consumer. But let's just talk about that for a second. There's also people. These are also people that we're working with and trading with and, creating potential opportunities. And it's also, here's for the liberals that or that don't get this. They use our standards to judge the standards of countries that are emerging, which is not fair, right? Okay, the factory, conditions in the Philippines for making microchips for whatever computer or something for a TV over here or whatever. Our standards would look at that and say that's a not good working condition. The pay is crap. Like they don't have great benefits, right? But that's not fair because the only way that they were able to compete for those jobs is precisely because they charge less and because those conditions to them are an improvement. Now, let's see where they're at in 50 years or forget it, 20 years, right? it's not fair that we do that and we don't really look at the whole picture. And both sides do this through their own lens that they use, and it really distorts things.
I think that's a valid point, and I also think it is the responsibility of, especially, I think let's just use Lululemon as an example, right? When Lululemon had 6 stores, they were all in Canada. They were kind of a boutique store, and they were they were buying stuff from some place that have exploitative labor practices. Like, you could say, well, they don't have the resources to really do that investigation, yada yada yada. That's one thing. Lululemon now, right? If they're using, and I think they use the Philippines. Whenever I worked there, they did. Where was that? I think it was the Philippines, but they have they do really good work over there. But at that point, if you're Nike or something like that, I think you have a responsibility to say, hey, like, what are the conditions? Maybe they're making $2 a day, which in their world is good, right? But you have also places like the entire structure that this, like, essentially sweatshop was in, and I forget what company they were working for, like, collapsed, and like 300 people died. Like, if you're making that much money off of that cheap labor, like, I think you have a responsibility to make sure people are, like, not dying at work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You want to know?
I mean, Apple's a good example of that too, where they were, was it Foxcore or something like that, where people were, like, jumping off? They had to put nets on the building because they were jumping off. Now, it's like, well,
you know what's some good news about this, though? This topic that we're talking about is that there's lots of evidence of this, that as countries become wealthier, they stop caring so much about, like, I need food now, I need to create, a shelter for myself now. And then you get past that, and then it's like, okay, I can build a family, and I want to make sure that there's a good work, that work environment isn't super crazy. And then you keep elevating, and then you start to worry about the environment. Like, you ain't worrying about the environment if you can't get food and you're dirt poor, right? But you do once you get wealthy enough to really think about other things. Well, here's the beauty of kind of what's going on right now. Because we continue to grow, people continue to have access to more and more things, and for all intents and purposes, the average person is far wealthier today than they were, 30, 40, 50 years ago, that now people aren't just valuing a product because of its price, and then not just because of its quality. Those we've got there, right? Oh, first it was price, then it was price plus quality. And now what we're starting to do is say, yeah, you have a good product and the price is okay, but, like, how are you treating your workers? Or what's your carbon footprint? Which is kind of cool, because that's a market pressure. There was nobody passed a law. Now, I think we say what we care about more than we actually take action. Obviously, I care so much
about. It feels good to be righteous.
Yeah, but really, like, what are your actions? Like, okay, Leonardo DiCaprio, you care about the environment, but you have a fucking yacht that burns more carbon or whatever than 100 of me combined. You have many, whatever. Do you really believe in that, right? But what we're starting to see now is it's a selling point. When a company starts to use something as a selling point, that they feel there's a bit of a market signal. And what you're seeing a lot of companies do, we work with some of them on our podcast, is they sell their products, good product, good value, carbon neutral, and our factories are manned by this or managed by this. We make sure we pay our workers this much. Really cool that consumers are now starting to care about that stuff. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, I think it is too. I mean, I did a perfect example of that today. I went up and picked up, I got, I really hated my hunting pack, and it was a QU pack. People like those, but I didn't like it. So I went and bought one from Kafaru. I've actually bought 2 packs, and they go on the same frame. They're all American made. Their quality is absolutely ridiculous. I love the lifestyle that those guys, they're kind of like MAGA dudes. A lot of them, they're kind of funny, but they're like, they give zero fucks. Aaron Snyder, the founder, has been on Rogan before. Okay. He's on there with the fat dip. They're just like, those kind of dudes. They're like hard fucking dudes, And I just love their culture. But that's like the fact that it's all American made. I'm like, all right, this guy is like very pro-American worker. I dig that. Like, I think it's great. I don't think that everything needs to be made here necessarily. I think more stuff could be made here. We should do a better job of that.
But you're doing well enough. The point is, you're doing well enough to where you care. Like, you can show that.
I spent $1,300 on backpacks, bro.
Yes. Right. Now, imagine if you were fucking broke, dude, and you're trying to support your family. I don't give a shit where this is made. I need a backpack.
You're getting a Dora the Explorer backpack that was made in Cambodia at the dollar store.
Yes.
And that's, and there's no shame in that either. Like, you're just doing what you have to do, or Walmart or wherever.
Yes.
And it is what it is. And you're also not hunting for a month out of the year. And stuff like that. So you have that. It's like, it's a privilege to be able to give a fuck about that kind of thing.
It is. And it's awesome. And what it points to, and I don't think this is the answer to everything, but what it points to is, if we want to solve the problems of the world and have people care about things other than just themselves, one component, I don't think this is everything, but one component of it is that people people's wealth grows, that they get to the point where they can care about things now because they're not worried about just their shelter, their food, themselves. But now they're looking at, if you're not doing so well, you just need a car. When you're doing really well, you're like, I want a car, but you know what? I want a car that, aligns with my values. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because it's okay. I got the money. So it's really cool. It's really cool to see that because we seem to be moving in that direction. Like I know, like pollution and, burning fossil fuels and causing, potential damage to the environment. That's a big issue. But what you'll see is with these wealthy nations is their per capita carbon footprint and pollution creation, whatever, starts to do this as they become wealthier and wealthier. So as a country develops, it's like dirty as fuck per person.
Yeah.
But then as it gets more and more wealthy, it speeds up and then it kind of crests and then it kind of comes down, which is really, it's kind of cool. That's a good thing. I think we're seeing that, especially in the U.S. right now. If you look at like
I think we're down 15%.
Yeah.
With the higher population, which is a big deal. And that's a lot of that has to do with cars. But then again, who's driving the gas guzzling, polluting cars? It's the working class people who can't afford a new car.
Yes.
Right? And I want to get into this with markets because I know, you and I have gotten into about like just markets being able to sort it out. I get frustrated, but I think that let's just do climate change and we'll talk about pollution. I think those are two separate things and I get frustrated they're convoluted into one because you can see plastic pollution and that drives me fucking insane.
Yeah.
And
that's easy. That's obvious and easy, right?
Exactly. And we don't focus on that at all. But when you look at this, right, I think the market's doing a great job of moving us in the right direction there. Mm-hmm. I don't think the government needs to get that involved. Elon Musk did the same thing. Tesla did a big part in that, right? Yep. By creating luxury cars that are in between $35,000 and $150,000. So they're obtainable. Mm-hmm. Not that getting batteries is exactly a clean business, but it is what it is. But it's pushing things where now my buddy just bought a full-size pickup truck, a Chevy Trail Boss 4-door, 4-wheel drive with a 3.0 liter Duramax diesel in it, and it'll get 40 miles to the gallon.
Oh wow.
It's crazy. And I want one, right?
Wow.
Now I want the GMC version of a diesel truck that'll get 40 miles to the gallon. That's huge. And I think in our lifetime, we'll be seeing these cars. Now they're more expensive to maintain, but once they become more popular, because it's a twin turbo engine, same thing. The new Toyota full-size truck. And I have to have a truck. I have to have a 4-wheel drive truck. I have a 4Runner right now, 16 miles to the gallon. It drives me crazy.
Right.
It also has a small gas tank, so I get like 300 miles. Whereas the new Tundras that just came out, twin turbo V6s with a hybrid with batteries. So it's a hybrid. You get 700 miles out of a tank and you're getting about 25 miles to the gallon. That's great for a full-size truck, with lower maintenance costs of a diesel. But that's the market, right? The market's doing some great things there. Whereas I think when it comes to pollution, right, I get really frustrated with this part of the market because we export our shit a lot. Like the American companies, a lot of times the stuff's not made in America, but it's American companies. We'll just use Pantene Pro V, for example.
Sure.
Well, they say like India doesn't have a lot of, they want to get some cleaning products to India, but people in India didn't have enough money to buy a big bottle of shampoo like we do. So they started putting them in basically like ketchup packets.
Yeah.
Right? So you have you can go spend like 5 cents to get a ketchup packet of shampoo or like the body wash soap shampoo mix, and then all just ends up in the ocean because they don't have the gas or the trash infrastructure to get rid of their stuff. They used to just they didn't have a lot of trash because they were just buying food at the market for the day or a couple days. There's not a lot of trash associated with that. So they don't have the infrastructure for that. But these American companies are now, in my view, the market is exploiting these people and it's ending up in the ocean. That's when people say, well, America's not the biggest polluter. And it's like, well, but American companies are. Like Coca-Cola pollutes more than anybody else. And these like single-use plastic bottles, I think this is a role of government where they could change market incentives. Liquid Death does this. Great company.
Yeah.
They don't make shit in plastic bottles. It's all in cans.
Yeah.
Anything smaller than a liter can be in a fucking can.
Yeah. You know what? That's a very complex issue because the question I would ask is what would happen? You're talking about India and many of these countries are emerging that you're kind of referring
emerging
to.
countries. India is just one example. I just pulled that out of the hat.
Yeah. So emerging economies meaning they're coming out of third world and they're developing, right? So kind of where we were at the turn of the Industrial Revolution type of deal, right? All right, what's going on? What's the question is what would happen if American companies didn't sell products to those people? That's the question that we need to ask in order to see what the consequences would be of, okay, will we actually produce less pollution? Maybe we will, but will there be less pollution and less garbage? Because somebody will try to supply that. Will that prevent them from advancing faster? Because American companies are really well poised to deliver a product with a thin margin line and still profit. Whereas now they're having to get that product from local producers. Eventually they can get to that point, but through that process, does that mean that less wealth is created? And maybe it's 5% less wealth over the next 10 years, and people think that's not a big deal. 5% is millions of people dying, right?
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be the wealthy, like middle and up. Like right now, if we drop the economy 10%, like rich people would be like, oh, that kind of sucks. My portfolio, dropped or whatever. But poor people would be fucked. They'd be really fucked. Like people on the edge are done, right? So that's the question. So I think when we look at because here's the deal. And when I say the market, I'd like to change that to people.
Yeah.
People working together is messy, is not perfect, and we're solving complex problems the best that we can. And then as we solve a problem, we realize that our solution, there's a better solution. Yeah. Let's use this one. So it's like we're working together, and it's really hard. It's like really fucking hard. Like this problem with and I agree with you on pollution. I think that's a no-brainer. In fact, it's one of the areas where government intervention has shown remarkable results. Like, like the Hudson River, you couldn't swim in there in the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, there was times when DuPont was poisoning people's water. Like they knew they were doing it. When they were making nonstick pans, I mean, they were killing people's cattle. Lots of people. I mean, I don't know how they're still a company.
Yeah, like unleaded gasoline was a result of government intervention, exactly. Right? Like, so I see that. I see lots of value there. The climate is more complicated because we're in this weird. I definitely we're impacting the climate or what we do on Earth. The greenhouse gases like that. I think that's we don't know how much it's impacting. I think that people say they know, they're full of shit. Those models are really, really hard, especially the further you go out.
Yeah, Randall Carlson did a good job of explaining that on Joe Rogan. He's not a climate guy, but he believes that we're like influencing it. Yeah. But he goes back 50,000 years and shows the change in climate from different things. I mean, climate does just change on its own. We cannot exist.
It's hard to know exactly, but we know we're doing something, right? We know we're doing something, and we probably have a better answer. But the problem is that the human population, and forget us rich people over here in America, because most of the world or much of the world isn't in our situation. We are so reliant on energy, natural gas, oil, petroleum, carbon-based, energy. It's inexpensive. It's energy dense. We've been using it for a long time. There's lots of innovation surrounding it.
It creates a fuck ton of jobs.
It's easy to transport. Like nothing, by the way. There's only one thing that competes with carbon-based energy sources. It's not solar. It's not. None of that shit actually works really well. We don't have the technology yet. That's just a fact. I'm not, I would love it if it was, but it's just a fact. And there's lots of infrastructure built around, oil and that stuff's already there. So that's part of the reason why it's so inexpensive. We have more access to it now than we did 30 years ago because of fracking and stuff like that. So the problem is, okay, if we forcefully reduce our production of greenhouse gases by saying we're going to add a cost to it or we're going to cap it, we're going to say you can only... The people that we end up killing a lot of people because there's no solution. So now without energy, like I'm okay, but the freaking millions of people who just got like electricity and running and clean water are dead. All of a sudden they're dead because they're the ones that suffer the most. So it's like, oh shit, what do we do? Now here's how you know that that politicians are full of shit over this. They argue.
Are we going nuclear?
We are. We sure as fuck are.
Good.
Yeah, that nobody wants to touch that, and I know why. Nobody wants to touch it because first off, you'd have to reverse the political propaganda that we've been told around nuclear for so long. But I think we could do that. The real reason is there's a lot of lobbyists on both sides that don't want nuclear. Really solves of all the technologies we have right now. I'm not future pretend technology like right now. New tech nuclear technology could literally like change everything. Really could.
Yeah.
But nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to do that.
I was driving through Utah because we talked about that one day, and I ended up went to Moab, and I was like, this would be a great place for a nuclear plant because it's out in the middle of fucking nowhere. Yeah. It's gorgeous out there. Don't get me wrong, but I'm like, well, you could build it. You could like it kind of. I mean, it's not. You don't want to think about it that way. What was the one in Russia that blew
Chernobyl?
Up? Chernobyl. Yeah, like they had a town kind of built to service the nuclear reactor, and I can't find a justification for that not to be the case, except for the oil and gas lobby.
Yeah.
And that
they don't want it. So on the right, they don't want that. Yeah. They don't want that. On the left, There's a green lobby that is very, very powerful now. They've gotten lots of subsidies, they have a lot of political power. They don't want it either because solar can't compete. I'm sorry. The tech doesn't exist. You can't store the energy well. The sun doesn't always shine. Look at Germany. They turned off their nuclear reactors, tried to go crazy solar. Now they end up buying 50% of their natural gas from Russia. So like they're worse than they were before, which is silly. And they had nuclear power plants that work. So neither side wants the solution. And comparing current nuclear tech to the past is not fair.
It's like comparing a 1987 like Chevy truck to that truck car I was just telling you about today.
It's most of that technology is from the 60s.
Yeah, it's crazy. And they were so, and that's one thing about happening where it happened in Russia. It's like they cut so many corners with the graphite tips and these different things. Like it was. Yep. There wasn't a market incentive driving it too, which led to some different things. They were incredibly negligent with it.
Yep.
So yeah. I mean,
current nuclear tech, current nuclear reactors don't melt down. So they don't have meltdowns. They can use waste as energy from older nuclear reactors. And the amount of waste they create is so small, it's ridiculous. There's nothing that we have that even compares.
Why are no states taking this on?
The regulations that we passed around first of all, politically, it's like you got to educate the population. Everybody's scared.
It'll take years for it to actually be built and be done. So you're talking about multiple terms for it to even be done.
Tremendous. The regulations and cost of building, it's so insane. What they need to do is they need to deregulate the shit out of it, maintain the ones that make sense, probably have some federal funding, or allow private companies to build a nuclear reactor, which then is maybe looked over by the government and the agency, but allowed to profit off of. That might be an option too. Nonetheless, we would have them pop up. But right now, as it is, it costs so much money, it's almost impossible. And politically speaking, a governor that says, we're building a nuclear reactor, they have a tough job because when people think nuclear reactor, they think, 5 Mile Island, they think Chernobyl, they think, oh shit, terrible pollution and whatever. When in reality, it's the complete opposite. So I just think
it's way cleaner than anything else. I mean, it's one of those things that it's feel frustrating because it does seem to make so much sense, but there's no discourse around it at all. And it's as frustrating as the healthcare situation, which is what I wanted to get into. Because you and I think there's one thing you and I argue about more than anything else, because we've been pretty friendly so far, is healthcare. And I want to bring up this one thing. So Mark Cuban, and this is to your credit, like this is the market doing its thing, right? Mark Cuban to the rescue. I did this. I don't know if you saw the video I did.
I did.
But I got so fucking angry at that leukemia drug that he's selling. It's a 15% markup, right? So he's very clear about his profits. And there's a $3 fee for compounding for the pharmacist, right? So whatever the 15% is plus $3. He's selling this leukemia drug, which leukemia isn't like a lot of things, right? Like kids get leukemia. You can't, there's a very little thing you can do about it. It's just kind of a thing that happens that is super unfortunate.
Yes.
And the price difference was under $50 at Mark Cuban's pharmacy, where the market rate is over $9,000 for a month.
I know.
Like that decimates family. Like that puts people into bankruptcy. And I'm like, how do you justify that? Because that doesn't seem to me like innovation. That seems like a big pharmaceutical company bought an innovative biotech company, and then while people were already using their drug, they marked it up by 1,000%.
Yeah. Okay. So what's the one thing in the market that will almost always drive cost down? Anything, right? Think of anything in a market.
Supply.
Well, in competition and supply, right? So if you have a product that nobody else has, you have a major advantage. Now, let's say you create a great product and now competitors see, Connor's got this great product. Let's do something. We know what he did. Let's try and copy it, make it a little different. Now competition enters in. You start to see the price drop because as they compete, they're trying to compete for the consumer. They innovate, they become more efficient. And this is just how it works. Not perfect, but it's very powerful force for innovation, lowering cost. Okay. We have laws in this country that make it illegal for foreign pharmaceutical companies to sell us drugs. You want to know what would...
While we're selling drugs, we have companies in California that were selling, was it monoclonal antibodies or no, COVID tests. It was a company in California that was barred from selling COVID tests. They were like $2 a piece into the US and selling them overseas to Europe, to the UK, which is like, it's not like they were selling them to some third world country. They were selling them to just the UK.
Yeah. You want to see what would happen to prices of pharmaceutical companies or pharmaceutical drugs if we lifted that regulation? Said, hey, any pharmaceutical company. Now, here's a deal. You might have to find, the FDA might say, we need to make sure that you guys, your drugs are clean. So we'll test a batch of whatever you send or whatever. each time it comes in. I think that would be easy. That might have an additional cost, but whatever. But we're going to open the market. So now you go to the doctor and you're like, oh, you're sick. You need this drug. And here are the different companies you can pick from. Here's which one do you want to pay. Oh, shit. The one from India is way cheaper. I'm going to get that one. You allow that to happen. You ain't going to charge $9,000 for a freaking pill. The other thing is, and here's the other sad fact. First of all, the way the insurance companies work with the medical industry.
Dude, this is so fucked. It gets so fucked.
Yeah, well, people just we don't pick and choose because our insurance companies already agree to pay. They raise the prices. There's very little competition. Insurance can't cross state lines in many cases. Like it creates these markets where with these distorted signals, and so the prices of things get super. Like an ambulance ride is $10,000. How the fuck?
Dude, I actually broke both my heels once upon a time in college, and I waited an hour and a half for a cab because I knew how much the ambulance was going to cost, and I paid the cabbie $20 to push me up to the ER in a wheelchair.
Yeah. How exactly? Like how is it? It's like education's another one. The medical industry and the educational industry are heavily regulated and controlled to maintain competitive advantages and whatever. Make no mistake, when this happens, what you have are the controlling companies, the powerful companies, working with government to limit competition and increase their profits. That's what they're trying to do. So how is it possible that I take a course at a university and a book costs $300?
Yeah. And that's what we say that it's not hyperbolic. That's it's in between $150 and $400 for a book. But and the other thing, if you're smart about it, you can buy the previous edition for $15 on Amazon. Sometimes I would when I was in college, I figured that out. I was like, well, I'm just not going to spend this money because my parents were actually paying for me to go to college. I was really grateful for that. And that's the product of somebody who didn't get an education but made money. Mm-hmm. Like he's like, the first thing they think about is like, you need an education because you need a better chance. But I would just not buy the books until I needed them.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, I bet half the time I didn't have to buy the book. And if I needed it, I would just borrow somebody else's in study hall or whatever, and just like,
but nonetheless, how are they even able to sell a $300 book in the age of digital information? Because there's no competition. Exactly. They're protected. So nobody else could sell information around that. It's all this self-created ridiculous market. So
when they're also the kids that are in college, like when we were in college, right? We would pay for that books, we'd do our thing, whether you were using student loans or whatever, it didn't feel real. And you'd go sell the books back to the bookstore for 10 cents on the dollar, and then you'd have $200 that you could spend at the bar from your $1,200 worth of books.
Yeah,
and it was absolutely insane. And this is the thing where I agree with you. Like the government interference in the college industry and in healthcare has caused more problems than it solved.
Oh, tremendous! And I think if you allowed, like for example, if you look at the regulations around the creations of medications and drugs, holy shit, it costs hundreds of millions of dollars to get something from beginning to end to market. Meanwhile, oftentimes there's certain investments and innovations that don't happen because, for example, if I'm trying to come up with a cancer treatment and I'm a pharmaceutical company and I have $100 million to create a new drug, my options are another form of chemo or this potential experimental drug that could cure cancer. But our risk factor, we're going to waste $100 million if it doesn't work out. Here, probably going to come up with a new form of chemo and make our money back. And so
that's always been an argument of mine too. It's like, it's more, the markets would say it's more advantageous, in my opinion, to not cure cancer because they milk those people for everything they're worth for forever. And it's like, it's terrifying to watch. It's just devastating.
It is. I had someone very close to me, die from it, and I was really close to them and to the whole situation. I'll tell you what, like someone comes up with the cure for cancer, you can't tell me they're not going to become the wealthiest.
Oh no, they'll be Jeff Bezos overnight.
Yeah.
But the thing is, but you're saying the safest option, right?
That's it. Yes, and that's because of all these rules and regulations that really limit innovation and creation, and it's a big problem. And so that's what you have with our medical industry. So you have the kind of the worst of both worlds.
Yeah.
And you've got this ridiculous like stuff that doesn't make any sense. You have limited access when we shouldn't. Like, why can't pharmacists prescribe many medications? Why do I need to go to a fucking doctor? Why can't physicians' assistants handle most of that stuff? Why do I need to?
I think they can. I think PAs can write scripts.
They can, right? Okay, why not
Yeah.
pharmacists, right? Why are so many things so strictly like you can't do this, got to go through this, got to jump through that?
And there's certain things like OxyContin, I would say that's probably a good
Right,
reason.
and not all
for
things,
that.
right?
Not all things, but basic, yeah. Like, and there's so many things that don't even. Yeah, it's such a weird, fucked up system. And I think, and I don't know, would changing the patent laws? This is a weird question, but would changing the patent law, saying like instead of 7 years, you get, I don't know, a year and a half. Is that decreasing regulation or increasing regulation?
Boy, you picked a
know.
hard one. No, you picked a hard one because if you don't have a patent, then less companies are willing to invest the time and money to create a product because then now they're not protected. So I've heard arguments on both sides. You know what I want? You want to hear something weird though? I think that that patents in most cases are going to be obsolete, probably in our lifetime anyway. Like,
yeah, I hope so.
When 3D printers are really good and really cheap. You know, this is totally within the realm of reality. We could create a 3D printer that could print molecules. So we could make our own drugs. We can make our own medicines.
What mRNA is in a certain sense.
Yeah.
But I think that like with the patents, right? And they're able to like, because that's the thing too with the innovation piece that really frustrates me is a lot of that research is done with taxpayer dollars. And I think if it's not done with taxpayer dollars, and I think it's important that we do give grants to certain places, maybe not the Wuhan Institute of Virology, but like funding some research, especially in the university setting, I think could make some sense. But again, what's happening there is that the people can't afford to do these clinical trials that the FDA requires, which is completely captured by big pharma, right? So 45, I've heard different numbers, but 45 to 60% of their funding comes from big pharma, right? Because that was a Republican thing that they pushed through to fast track more drugs. But then also there's not that much of an incentive for things to be that efficacious anyways. Like Tamiflu is a great example. Yeah. People don't remember this, but like bird flu, they pushed through Tamiflu on an EUA, right? And it doesn't do anything. Like I talked to a pharmacist about it. They're like, yeah, you maybe have like lessen your symptoms by 6 hours for the flu.
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, it's not cheap. It's not crazy expensive, but it's like, this thing doesn't even, it has no value.
You know what the problem is with medicine is, and I don't think anybody wants this, but if we severely reduced regulations and allowed people to take more of the responsibility onto themselves. But you know why people don't want to see that? We're so afraid of people hurting themselves or drugs being created with terrible consequences. And I think that would happen at first, but I think the innovation would happen so fast that we would get beyond it. It's just that process in between. I don't know. It's a very complicated, challenging question because one side of me is like, dude, the market will really do a good job and be fast about figuring this out. The other side of me is like, yeah, in that process, what kind of monsters are these pharmaceutical companies going to create?
Well, they're soulless entities too. It's like, do you watch Ozark by any chance?
No. I know so about that.
There's a part of it where they're doing a heroin deal with a pharmaceutical company to save them money. And one of the cartel leaders was meeting. It's like essentially a mockery of the Sackler family, right? And he meets this woman. He ends up being the leader of the cartel, but it's like Pablo Escobar type situation.
Okay.
And he goes, "Oh, you're the first person who I've ever met whose family's killed more people than mine." and I was laughing so hard at that I had to like pause the fucking show. I was dying. But it's crazy, man. And looking at it, I'm like, it is there's no solutions really. Like you have democratic socialists, right? Like Kyle Kulinski and these people. Which I used to kind of be in that camp, and libertarians are both like, this system's fucked.
Yep.
But libertarians don't want to talk to anybody who thinks that that taxation isn't theft, so they can't like come together. And I'm like, somewhere in between these two things, there's probably something that makes a fuck ton of sense.
Yes.
And it's so hard to like get these people to just communicate with one another.
Yeah, I think we need more market forces. I do think we need to address the accessibility to healthcare for certain people.
I think everybody needs to have access to a general. I was talking to the guy because I just got PRP injections in my knee, right, which aren't FDA approved, but my knee feels fucking awesome. And they were trying to get me to do surgery, and I was like, I don't think that you're going to be able to get in and stitch my meniscus back together. That seems a little bit hokey to me.
Yeah.
I think spinning my blood and pulling out platelet-rich plasma and injecting that into my meniscus and ACL and MCL and PCL actually it passes the sniff test for me as somebody who understands anatomy and physiology a little bit. But I mean, $3,000, which I felt was reasonable. My deductible was $6,000. So if I went to get surgery, I have to cover that anyways.
Yeah, right.
So it was one of those things where it's like, and meniscus surgeries are kind of like bullshit anyways. Like I think the inflammation from the surgery does more healing than that surgery itself.
Yeah, that's actually true. That's interesting. I read about that. There's articles about that.
Oh yeah, there's tons. And like I think it's like 60% of meniscus surgeries do nothing. Like if you look at an MRI before and after, it doesn't do but people feel better.
I know.
It's crazy. Like just so much, but you don't hear that information because it's complete regulatory capture, man. It's what, and there's so much politics in that situation. But then again, I think those knee injections would have cost $10,000 if it was covered by insurance.
Yes, isn't that weird?
And I paid cash for the MRI for that same knee, and they're like, "Well, you can pay us $650 right now, or we'll charge your insurance, and then you can pay $3,000 towards your deductible."
It's insane. It's absolutely insane.
What?
No, I think what we need market forces. We need more accessibility through those market forces. I do think we need a basic,
safety net.
Yeah, I do think that's important. I think that we need to include mental health in that, by the way. I think that's a very big one because, here's a situation that makes libertarians uncomfortable. And their answer is typically charity, which, okay, well, I don't know because it's not happening, but
that's been your answer to a lot of things.
Well, I'll tell you what, you know what though? Charity does a damn good job though when it exists.
It does when it's not completely polluted with bullshit. I don't think the Clinton Foundation is doing that much good.
Oh, come on. Yeah, that's garbage. But you're a closer connect to the charity. It's usually local. The efficiency of them is typically better at what they're doing. The people actually care. And because they're in contact with the people that they're helping, you have less taking advantage of or manipulating the system. Not
great
perfect.
example. That was the big fires that just happened. That was like 2 miles down. I thought we legitimately were on the verge of evacuating.
Wow.
But like people rallied for that shit.
Yeah, that's
like great. Before the fires were out, people were raising money.
Yeah,
that was really cool. It's cool to see a community come together like that.
Yeah, that's really great. So like the issue I was going to talk about is like the homeless issue. Like here in California, it's gotten really bad. I live in San Jose.
Bad before I left, and I left 2 years ago.
Bro, it's getting really bad. Like I know in LA, it's unbelievable. San Francisco is really bad. I'm here.
Santa Cruz is brutal.
Yes, I'm here in San Jose, and I see it all over the place. And these people obviously can't help themselves. The vast majority of them are severely mentally ill. Mm-hmm. So as a libertarian, the conundrum is: do we force them to get medical care because they're living? This is how they want to live. But it is causing lots of problems. It is, in my opinion, inhumane both to them and to the people around them. How would they ever get any care, like any kind of charity? Not really happening. It's obviously a big problem, not really happening. So that's where I could see that bottom, safety net really makes sense, especially in mental health. Like, I mean, they can't help themselves. I do think that a lot of them would, because we have a lot of shelters that are empty here. Do you know that?
Yeah, a ton of them because you can't do drugs in them.
They can't do drugs in them. I mean,
and it's like that's a whole thing on its own. A lot of them are Christian charities too.
Yes,
which are essentially tax write-offs for as if they need any more help.
Sure. But I mean, it sucks, and so it's like, why don't they want to help themselves? They're mentally ill.
Exactly.
So there's an issue there that I see. I get challenged with sometimes, but I'm like, yeah, and unless I could see like a really good, I think the market does a great job on a lot of things, but I think in certain things there's no market. Like the climate, I don't see a market there. It's too far advanced.
Cleaning plastic out of the ocean, same thing. It's like it's a worthwhile cause, but
nobody owns the ocean. Who owns the ocean? If you own the lake, you're gonna keep that shit clean. That's a market. Yeah. Nobody owns the ocean, so it's like the tragedy of the commons, right? It just gets polluted like crazy. So I get a lot of that, and I think that in those cases we do need government. We do need regulation. But in other cases, I think there's really, really powerful markets. We're just afraid of a lot of them. I'll tell you what, the last couple of years was a perfect example of that, Connor.
Yeah.
What we saw the past couple of years was a genuine fear of freedom. People were really afraid of letting people voluntarily interact with each other because of the fear of this, of COVID, of the pandemic. So a lot of people were perfectly okay with forcing shutdowns and forcing mandates. And, I don't care if it's your business. You're not allowed to meet with people you want to meet with if they're not vaccinated, right? It's like really crazy. And because we were afraid, because we were fearful. And freedom is very, very, markets are free-ish or more free than non-markets. They're scary. We're going to let people figure things out? Like, what's going to happen? Like, I want to have more control over that. So I get it. But historically, free people do better.
Yeah.
They just do. The past couple of years, if that hasn't shown anybody that, I don't know what will.
No, and I think I feel like privileged in the sense that, I don't feel privileged. The pandemic fucked me I mean, the reason these thought criminals and politically homeless exist is because I lost my income.
Mm.
Like my whole entire business was hinged upon people interacting with one another.
Yeah.
And then overnight that just disappeared. And I was like, well, I could try and revamp that, or I could talk about politics. And you and I talked about it like week 2. I was like, I think this is a better thing for me.
Yeah. And you're doing a good job, by the way.
I appreciate that. And I really appreciate you also like noticing and accepting the blind spots of libertarianism or just markets in general. Like there are places, like that's one thing I try and say too, even coming from the left. I'm like, dude, markets have a great, powerful role in this whole thing. And it's important to acknowledge that and not to be delusional about that being the driver of the prosperity that we do have in this country, while also acknowledging the issues. But I feel very privileged that I've sniffed out bullshit for years. Like I tell people this, like when I talk about not getting the vaccine, right? I'm like, why wouldn't you do that? I'm like, listen, I was doing speeches and writing papers in college about regulatory capture in the FDA, mostly through the lens of obesity and how like they push through in Europe, you can't get a supersized Coke, you know, and things like that. Yeah. But it was coming from that. I was like, I saw the corruption within the pharmaceutical industry and how the food industry, the pharma industry, like the regulatory bodies, I don't know why the fuck it's the Food and Drug Administration. It should be like, those should be 2 separate things completely.
I know.
It makes absolutely no sense. Maybe it made sense at one point, but I can't find the justification for it now. So for me, I have a different sense of what the fuck is going on because I've looked at things for over a decade through a very critical lens, especially when it came to government intervention. One thing the past couple of years has gotten me off of is a single payer healthcare system. Because when I saw, oh, you can just keep people from you can just say, hey, if you don't do this thing, you can't have the thing. And I'm like, well, that changes everything.
Yeah.
like Medicare for all died during COVID.
I know.
And it's, you know, and there was a justification for saying, hey, people need better access to healthcare, which I think is absolutely true. But it's hard looking at the whole thing and being like, listen, guys, I can't project my experience on you because I cared about this from a different perspective as being an obese kid, trying to understand that, going to college, doing health and fitness management, which is basically just kinesiology and business, getting into like understanding corruption at a young age. And then you asked me to do a thing that Rachel Maddow, who's brought to you by Pfizer, tells me to do. Like, I'm probably not going to do that thing. In the same way that I didn't get surgery on my knee, I got injections. In the same way that if I look at some different issues, maybe I think, oh, my hormone balance might be off, and I'll do something through a functional medicine doc versus going and getting like an SSRI. You know, like I just take the different, like kind of an alternative approach to things. And I think it's played out for me more often than not in a way better fashion. Like I ruptured my S1 disc when I was 19 years old and I was told never to deadlift again. And then fast forward 6 years, I'm deadlifting 600 pounds. Yeah. So it's like, and competing in, you know, high level CrossFit events. It was just, so it's like, I don't buy it anymore.
Yeah. And you know,
I had that experience and most people didn't have that experience. I still have friends. I have one friend in particular who's like, I think if you're not vaccinated, you should have to wear a mask. And I'm like, it doesn't do anything, dude. And she's like, it's about respect. If we would have locked down harder for the first, 2 weeks, we never would have had this. And I'm like, do you understand how I argue with her? Cause I'm like, I just don't want you to sound, you're my friend. I don't want you to sound stupid when you talk to people. Like I'm doing this. This isn't about me being right. This is about you not being looking like a fool.
Yeah. No. Come on. Okay. By this point, we have hindsight. Let's just go. Johns Hopkins just released a study that showed that lockdowns had no significant impact on COVID mortality, but it had profound negative impacts on society. No shit. There was no fucking logic. But here's the point.
The people that it hurt the most were the people that get ignored. The people that the fucking Democrats pretend to care about, which drove me up the fucking wall from like, I would say the first month and a half, I was pretty scared. And I think that was a rational place to be. I was like,
we didn't know anything.
On, figure it out. Like, just shut the fuck up. If people were freaking out about mask mandates, and I'm like, listen, dude, it's, I was defending Gretchen Whitmer and kind of how just trying. But then you get a couple months in and you start getting some more information and seeing what's going on, and people aren't dying in the streets like China said that was happening. It was just none of it made any sense.
No. For me, it's really about this. Like, it's cool you feel how you feel about your health or vaccines or what you want to do, and it's cool that someone else may feel totally different. If we're free people, we should be able to be free to voluntarily associate and interact with people or not. Like, if I own a business, it should be I should be able to put a sign up that says, if you're unvaccinated, you can't come in here, or you must show a vaccine card. That's fine. But I should also be able to say, all welcome, or only unvaccinated come into my shop, right? And people should be free to do that. And the outcomes of that are always better. And people behave, okay, we definitely can do some stupid stuff. But generally speaking, people behave in relatively rational ways. When they compared states that were hard lockdown to states that were not, and they used cell phone tracking to show movement and stuff. The people in the states that were really open, they automatically started to isolate and stop to go and congregate in crowded areas. Naturally, because they saw that the cases were going up. They did that on their own, just like the people in the lockdown areas, except far less damage, far less just broad, that's like the lockdown states just threw a nuke. Just bomb everything.
Most people are going to act in their own self-interest.
Yes.
Right? If you're an at-risk person, and not like I remember this QAnon lady who was like doing maskless flash mobs in these places, which is like that's kind of a dick thing to do to people. But it's got to the point here where and you go to like Arvada or Golden and you walk into a place that has a mask sign up and the person wearing the mask is the outlier now.
Yeah, that's great. Not here, man. Not here in San Jose. Everybody here in California is just it's insane, and it's not fair. Here's the biggest. This is an easy one. Like making kids wear masks.
Oh, dude, that's fucked up. I mean, that's undebatably fucked up.
No, I mean, first of all, even if the masks worked really well, anybody in the medical field could tell you there's a specific way you handle and use a mask. You're not going to get a fourth grader to do it that way. In fact, they're going to touch their face more and it's going to be a completely waste of time. Except now, they're not reading facial expressions. Parts of their brain are not developing like they used to. There's this reminder of fear, which is not fair to a kid that has no control over this fucking thing.
Yeah.
They're just in class. Tremendous damage to children, or you force them to stay home. They were a very low risk population. Like, oh, what if they come home and get grandma sick? Well, then grandma, let them make that choice. But boy, did we cause some serious. We're not gonna know the full extent of the damage we caused for a while.
Oh, decades.
Because of the overreaction, we just got manipulated.
I mean, this and this is one thing, and I kind of want to go into why I voted for Biden and what I was wrong and right about. But Jen Psaki saying this, right? When she said her kid, who's 3 years old, who is going to preschool, doesn't complain about the mask. I was like, bitch, your kid was 1 year old when the pandemic started.
Yeah.
This kid doesn't know anything else. If he's not complaining about the mask, that's a problem.
Yes. If he doesn't notice, then that's an issue.
Yeah. Like he's 3. Like, what are you talking? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
It was so crazy. And it's been so hard to see it. And now, I mean, right now we're in the middle, and this will come out later, but the Joe Rogan, Twitter mob is like freaking out. And it's like, dude, everybody needs to just chill the fuck out on both sides.
Yeah.
I would like for, Robert McCullough or Malone to just calm down. And I would also like for, what the fuck's that guy's name? I don't know, Don Lemon to fucking calm down.
Yeah.
Like everybody needs to just take a breath.
Yeah.
We're cool. Like, and the thing is with the vaccine, I've said this from the beginning, or for a long time. A lot of people are probably better off vaccinated.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to move the needle for me at all. I don't know. I'd brace, even if it's a small risk. I don't know why I'd brace it. But it's like, if you're obese or you're old, like you have 98% of the elderly population, like over 60 vaccinated. Why don't we hear about that big win? That's a huge win.
Yeah.
Like, I'm glad my granddad got vaccinated. The vaccine almost killed my granddad, but I'm glad he got vaccinated. I think it's probably the best thing for him. He didn't not getting the booster. They even recommended he didn't get the second shot for an extended period of time because he got pneumonia from the vaccine.
Oh, wow.
So, and then I had a conversation, same friend who said we should lock down harder. I was like, okay, your 80-year-old granddad died of COVID. So is that a bigger tragedy than my 74-year-old granddad dying from the vaccine?
Yeah.
Like, does one matter more than the other?
Yeah, but nobody counts all the unintended deaths and suicides and depressions and drug overdoses and domestic
abuse. That will
abuse.
persist longer than COVID.
It's going to persist longer. It caused more problems. We now are seeing clear evidence. And look, this is how I am, okay? I would be more likely to consider taking a vaccine, the COVID vaccine, if you didn't blatantly gaslight and lie to me so much. Like, okay, we're going to pass a law that says you have to have a vaccine in order to work, for companies over 1,000 employees or whatever. Nobody says natural immunity. Like that to me, that's bullshit. Obviously, you worked with the pharma companies and you're like, listen, we're going to make sure it's just vaccines because all these people already had COVID and they won't think they need. And we know the natural immunity was better. They don't even talk about that. What? That to me was so ridiculous and insane. It was so absolutely insane. And then trying to get, what were they trying to do? They were trying to say that they wouldn't release the full records of the tests of the vaccine for like 74 years or something like that.
That's like so crazy. I mean, I even said the other day, I was like, if I was going to have, somebody said, put a gun to your head to taking a vaccine, I would take the Russian one or the Cuban one, just out of spite. Because they're good. They're actually good. And I'm like, honestly, at least the government's on the hook for theirs. You know what I'm saying?
Jeez.
But here, they have liability shield, baby. Like, and I was like, that's the thing. I would be so much more likely if that liability shield didn't exist. Because if that thing does fuck you up, you are entitled to retribution and financial. And now that's not okay. And people were, I mean, it's like, dude, okay, you're making how many billions of dollars? First off, that's taxpayer money. And you're not gonna support the people who you fucked up along the way.
I know, dude.
You know the collateral damage,
bro.
Give me a break,
bro.
Give me a break.
If I swear to God, if the last couple of years, you know what's wonderful about it? We'll remember this for the next 10 years. People are gonna look back and be like, oh yeah, that was really fucked up. But then 10 years after that, they'll just totally forget, like they did after.
It'll happen again.
And then some other shit will happen again. Or I don't know if people actually learn their lesson. Maybe it seems like people are not as fearful of this war threat as they usually might be. I think maybe people are kind of like, all right, I'm done being afraid now. I hope. Because
most people I know, but I live in it's a kind of a self-regulated pool, like roll their eyes at it.
Okay.
They're like, oh God.
Yeah. Well, you're in a good crowd.
Yeah, that's my people. But I really wanted to get into the union debate because I think, and I kind of want to put my position on here. I think that not blatant, like not blanket, like I think teachers unions and police unions are generally a problem.
Yeah.
More problem than they are a benefit. You can't get fired, things like that. I think coming from a blue collar family in a blue collar world, I think in the union workers I've talked to that work like dock workers and things like that, I think collective bargaining in that world is incredibly important. And you've seen these people get worked over time and time again. And I have a hard time grasping the average CEO pay being 300x the average employer pay. Not so much. You posted the thing about Apple, right? Or we were going back and forth on that. That's a different conversation because I think Apple probably has more six-figure employees than most companies on the planet, right? So it's like that's different. I'm talking about like blue collar people. I don't think Tesla needs to be unionized, right? I think it's really fucked up that they're kept out of these climate conversations because they don't have union workforces when Chevy and Ford do. When I think Chevy and Ford is maybe a different situation because one, they were bailed out, you know what I mean? And I think Ford paid that back, but still, it's a different conversation. So I'm curious, like where you land on that. You said that unions kind of tanked the automobile industry in the 80s.
Well, yeah. Okay. So I don't have an issue with unions so long as they're voluntary. So the problem becomes when you work for a company and you have to join the union that is a part of that company. Because now it's very different. Like, I don't have a problem. Like you want to start a union, that's fine. But the employer should also be free to say, if you join this union, you can't work here. Like I think that's totally fine. I think there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I think when we pass laws that say, no, you can't fire someone from joining this union and you must sign up in this union if you work at this place, then you start to develop some issues. Like in the automobile industry, we were crushing everybody. And the unions did things to they thought would benefit the workers, right? We need more of this, we need more of that, we need less of this, less of that. Things got very expensive and we couldn't compete anymore. And it destroyed the automobile. Detroit it was a shining city of production and wealth. And now Detroit is very different. So
it's getting better. Yeah. But I will say after driving a Toyota and really enjoying Toyotas, which are a lot of those things are manufactured in the United States anyways, but they're better cars.
Yeah.
And they're doing better now. They're getting there, but it's like Toyota and Germany make better, or Japan and Germany make better cars.
Yeah.
I mean, Browning firearms are made in Japan for a reason. Like the manufacturing is incredible.
Yeah. I mean, I think all automobiles have come a long way, including American automobiles. But I do think that if there's laws forcing that you say you can't fire people for joining a union, and there's laws that say you have to, rules that say, hey, if you work here, you have to join this union. I think that's when we start to run into problems. Like the teachers unions has way too much power.
Well, that's a public sector union, though. That's a different.
That is, but I mean, it's like kind of one example. They have way more power than the parents, right? Who I guess you could consider the consumers. Police unions, I get why they exist, but they also can cause, protect bad cops and do lots of bad shit.
That's the worst thing. Yeah. They're protecting bad cops. There's got to be something done about that. That's a real pervasive problem.
Oh, dude, I agree. I agree.
There's nothing better than a good cop, but there's nothing worse than a bad cop. Like the ends of the spectrum there are so far apart.
You know what they need to do, dude? What they need to do. You know what I think? I don't think anything will fix everything, but I think if we made every cop wear a body camera, and anytime a police officer makes an arrest or has any kind of a confrontation with a person, that video is accessible to either
transparency,
right? Now, then I think you'll see some really good checks and balances. That's what I think.
I mean, it's just accountability is all it takes.
Yeah.
That's a big in training. I think like a fat ass cop, I'm like, dude, I can take care of myself.
Yeah,
like I've got guns too. Like
Yeah.
we're good. If I can beat your ass, you probably don't need to be a cop. 'Cause I'm not a trained fighter.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
but I'll be honest with you. I bet you those body cameras would get a lot would support a lot more police officers than it will with the people that they interact with. I bet there's a lot more.
Oftentimes, yeah.
Yeah. So I just think transparency there, would help. I think with the schools, God, if you let the parents take the state money and choose what school to go to, that would be great.
And that's the charter school argument, is it not?
The school choice.
School choice.
Yeah.
And explain that to me, because I haven't thought. I don't have kids, so I don't think about that much. Like explain to me the difference in the system now and school choice, and then we can talk about testosterone and E&D heads.
Yeah, fun stuff. All right, so in many places, you live in an area, a district, and the only school you're assigned a school. So as a parent, the public school your kid goes to, there's only one choice. It's the one that's in your district. You can't move them outside. And so usually bad neighborhoods or poor neighborhoods or lots of crime in particular neighborhoods equals a school that is also not taken care of, really bad, but the guaranteed funds, guaranteed. So long as people live there, the state funds it and your kid has to go there. And the parents really have no choice. They can't move their kid around, okay? And when you have guaranteed money, you don't have very many incentives to change anything or whatever. School choice is like this. Like here in California, the average student in a school year, okay? So school year is not a full year, right? Because they have summer off. So a school year, the average student will get about $13,000 in that year of funding. So that's how much the school gets per year per student on average. It's a lot of money. Imagine it instead if a parent gets a voucher. Here's your public school voucher, and you can take it to any accepted education source, public school, these private schools, wherever, and it's credit. The public schools will accept it as full payment. Maybe private schools can accept it as partial payment if you want to do something like that, or maybe not at all. That's something else to discuss. But at least the parent has the power to say, you know what, I'm taking my kid out of this fucking school. You guys suck. I'm going to go over there. You know what'll happen? The good schools, and I know what'll happen at first, the good schools get filled up. There'll be a waiting list, the bad schools, whatever. But eventually those good schools continue to expand because they're kicking ass. They got a wait list. Oh, good. There's a wonderful signal. The bad schools keep losing students. They keep shrinking. Shitty teachers. Hey, you're gone because you're losing us students. We're losing our money. And parents have more power. Now, some parents aren't going to care. But the ones that do, man, because you want to talk about inequality, nothing is more unequal than that in this country. Yeah. Nothing. And the one thing that you see the biggest return on when you invest in is, or at least government investment in a good way, is education. Not in a bad way, but when you see kids in bad situations get really good education, teachers that make a difference, where it really does change the trajectory of things. Like unwedded pregnancy goes down or teenage pregnancy goes down. They're more likely to go to college. They're interested in school. It's safer. They're learning things. So
yeah, community's better. Your friends that you end up hanging out. If your parents are shitty, you have friends who have better parents that are kind of like end up being, and that's happened to like we had a lot of kids that came over to my house that just like were around a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And just because like we had stuff and my parents were cool and they would come in and work for me or whatever, different stuff like that. And there's good. I mean, there's a lot that comes up in the community of school too. I think. I think that happens in college as well. I think it's one of the biggest benefits of college. I think one of the best things we can do is make a bachelor's degree available in 2 years. It's like reform number one, because you don't need stupid fucking classes to do that.
Doesn't that stupid?
And that makes a ton of sense. I mean, I definitely can see some problems in that, but at the end of the day, I think, because there's like access to schools, but I think if a school is doing great and a school is doing shit, what's to stop that school from taking over the model of taking over the smaller school and taking over that model, like reevaluating that model? I think going 2 months on, 1 month off instead of having a summer break makes worlds more sense.
Sure.
But if I had a choice to send my kid to a school that did that instead of having summer break off, I'd be like, that's way better.
Well, sure. But now these at least these schools now are kind of fighting for the parents to send their kids there. Like, let's do a good job. And oh shit, we're losing kids and we need
different courses and different. Yeah,
totally. Like I think you would see some market forces at work. And I feel bad, man. I feel bad if you live if you don't make much, you're lower on the socioeconomic ladder. You live in a, underdeveloped, poor area. You're stuck with the freaking school that your government says you have to go to. Why can't I take my voucher? They're all public schools. Why can't I take my voucher and go to the better one. Like,
Yeah.
why can't I do that? You're paying for education. This one sucks. Let me take them to that one over there. And I know a lot of people wouldn't do that. Some people don't care, but the people that did, wow, think about what an impact it would have, right?
Well, and people will do a lot for their kids, man. And I think that,
I
yeah,
agree.
I don't see, I can't, I think of more reasons to do that than not. One thing I did promise to talk about, because I wanted to wait to the end to talk about this, give people a little bit of a reason to linger, but I voted for Biden, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And my justification for this was,
Trump was the devil.
No, that wasn't that. I mean, Trump was annoying to me, and I was doing the show by then, so I would listen to the full clips. I wouldn't just listen to the sound bites. He still got on my fucking nerves the whole time. I was over it. And there was a couple reasons. One, I wanted to give the Republican Party an opportunity, a 4-year opportunity to figure their shit out and see what I thought that if they got rid of, if Trump doesn't run again, which he might, we'll see.
Yeah.
But I was like, who will shake this out? I think right now, and I'll just put this out there, I think Rand Paul's the best option right now. Will he win? Probably not. But I think he's the only person who's going to go. I think he's the only person that's going to go in there and actually shrink government a little bit.
He's the only one that would do it. Yeah.
I don't think Ron DeSantis would do it. I don't know shit about Ron DeSantis outside of COVID stuff, which is like, of course I agree with him on a lot of that shit. But like, other than that, I'm like, I don't know anything else. And I'm not going to praise him for that.
Yeah. He acts like he's like more like a Rand Paul type, but I don't necessarily agree with that because I've seen some of the stuff that he's done. So I don't know, but he is popular. We'll see. Trump, if he runs, the Democrats win. I bet they pray that he runs.
Yeah, they do. I mean, they are. They're positioning it now. You know, and he's talked about it. I think the best thing that can happen for the Republicans is for him to run and lose in a primary.
Yeah.
That would be good. So it's like, oh, well, now the Republicans rejected Trump.
Yeah.
Then what's your narrative?
Yeah.
That would crumble the narrative. But anyways, so I voted for Biden. I was on the fence. I was going to vote third party or just leave it blank. I almost started to leave it a hashtag leave it blank 2020.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know what? I'm going to vote for Biden. And here's why. I thought Bernie might have a little more influence. It pisses me off when people say that Biden is Bernie and like, I was like, he's not. Like, we would be way better off with Bernie Sanders as president than Biden, hands down, and would have been better with Trump too. I think in certain ways. But I'm biased there.
Yeah, I know.
But I was like, all right, we might get legalized marijuana because of the pressure from the squad. Like, I think the squad might apply those people might apply appropriate pressure and really focus on that. And I also thought that the Democrats would do, which made the most fucking sense to me, right? This is like the most logical thing as being rational, which is my problem, was like, they're going to get in the White House and they're going to declare a victory against COVID, take responsibility for that, and move on. But dude, and that was completely wrong, right?
Yeah.
And anybody can roast me all they want for this. Does that not make the most fucking sense as a way to win?
It does, until you realize just how powerful fear is and how effective it is.
I know.
You know when they pass these $1 trillion, COVID Relief Act and all this shit, and they're like, we're giving everybody $600 or whatever. Do the math. That's like a tiny fraction of all that money. Where'd the rest of it go?
Exactly.
That's the shit right there. They gave it to all their friends. They gave it to foreign nations that they made deals with. They gave it. I think it was Pakistan got like a bunch of money for like gender studies or some shit. Yeah. What does that mean? Does that mean we gave them money to buy weapons from us, or that we actually just giving them money for a deal?
Gender neutral weapons.
Yeah, it definitely ain't what we said, right? Yeah. So it's when you're in power like that. You know what sucks? The very people that should not be in power are the ones that seek it. Mm-hmm. And politicians, that's what they do, man. They want power, so you give it to them. And it's like, what do you expect, man?
I mean, I'm thinking about running for Congress.
Yeah, you know what though? That'll be tough, dude. It'll
be fun. It'll be more for. I think it would be really, really fun.
I think it would be fun, but you know what would be tough is they're dirty, bro.
It'll get nasty. But if everything about me is out there.
That's true.
It's like online. It's like it's like I've done cocaine a dozen times. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, it's there. Like, it's also the most popular drug on Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
But I know, and it was
that's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah, it's like it's not much to expose about me, unless you find like
makes it hard. Makes you hard to cancel.
Exactly, very much so. It's like, and that's the whole thing. But I think it just, as far as like putting it, I really want to run a campaign just like anti-partisanship.
Yeah,
that's like the campaign slogan. It's like these people are like, my responsibility would be to serve the people of my district, not the Democratic Party. Yeah, which is one of my biggest frustrations with both parties. Is like your allegiance to your party first, and then your constituency, and that's not the way it's supposed to go around. That's why I think independent governors. If people we made a push to have independent governors, we would have a better country. I think it's one of the best things we can do is nonpartisan governors. And because they have a lot of power in their state, they can do a lot of things, and they're beholden to no political party. Because I can tell you right now, Jared Polis made a lot of decisions based on what the Democrats wanted him to do, not because that was the right thing for the state.
Yeah, good luck getting him elected. Like, they have no money, no power, no influence. You got to join one. It's frustrating. It's like going to prison. you're going to go to prison. You're like, fuck, I got to join the Crips, or I got to join the
No, my
white
dad tells a great story about that, and I want to have him on the podcast to talk about it. He joined the white unaffiliated.
Oh wow, you're straight from your dad, aren't you? Politically,
Yeah,
homeless.
exactly. But he's like, I'm not racist, but like it's segregated as fuck. It's like the Crips, the Bloods,
Yeah.
the different Mexican gangs, the different cartels, and then like the white nationalists and the KKK.
Wow.
And they have but they also have unaffiliated groups for every race as well.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But they keep to themselves. Dude, people don't understand how impressively complex prison politics are.
Oh, jeez. It's and
the guards know that the prisoners police themselves. So like if one of these guys starts stealing, one of the guys in your group starts stealing from some other group, somebody else, that has to get handled within your group.
Oh wow.
Or else you start a fucking war.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's weird, dude.
Oh, I interviewed somebody who came out of prison, talked about his journey, fitness helped him or whatever. And yeah, he was telling me some crazy stuff, like the economies in prison, the innovation,
it's crazy.
The way they figure out how to make shit. It's like, yeah, you got a bunch of people with nothing else to do. We get pretty creative, man. We really figure things out.
My dad was in there reading Mark Manson and Jordan Peterson and shit like that for 6 years, and came out way better off.
Oh, that's awesome.
Really super, super proud of him.
That's awesome.
He said about 10% of guys in there want to make their lives better. The rest of them are just learning how to be better criminals.
Yeah.
But he's got some crazy stories about it. But I wanted to get into this. He actually started taking testosterone recently too.
Oh, cool.
So I'm about to get back on. I'm super fucking stoked. I know I influenced you into doing TRT.
Yeah.
What's been this is such a sidebar, but what's been your kind of response from all that?
Yeah. So,
I mean, you were already fucking jacked. So it's not.
Well, I mean, I had everything, it was really hard for me to accept because I had everything dialed in. I've always been fanatical about my exercise, diet, sleep, all this stuff. And, for like the last, 40 years or so, just like, man, I don't feel like myself. Like, am I just getting older? Like, what the fuck's going on? I'm not recovering. I'm gaining body fat very easily. I'm like, maybe it's just because I'm aging. Now, I never got my hormones tested because my libido was okay. So I know that one of the number one effects of low testosterone is like low libido. Well, my libido was okay. So I thought, well, I don't think it's my testosterone. So I think I'm okay. So I never got it tested. By the way, a little backstory. In my 20s, during the, I want to say, early 2000s, anabolic steroids were sold over the counter. They were sold as pro hormones. They were designer steroids, Superdrol, methylmasterdrol, 1-testosterone.
What year was this, you said?
These were the early 2000s.
Yeah. This is like Mark McGuire, that kind of stuff.
Past that. So androstenedione is a hormone, but it needs to get converted to testosterone. Eventually, these supplement companies realized, oh shit, like the way that they regulate hormones are specific. If we deviate from that a little bit, it's gray market. It's not illegal. So what they did is they actually went through pharmaceutical companies, rejected drugs, and produced them. And they were orally active anabolic steroids. So like in fact, Superdrol was one of the first ones I took, and I bought it on the internet, and it was totally legal, and it worked, of course. Superdrol today is like, people say it's stronger than Anadrol or Dianabol, like those classic steroids, right? So so I would take these, and I did that, off and on in my 20s, and then I stopped for a while. So I did that. So I think that's what might have contributed to my lower testosterone later on in life. So anyway, never got it tested, because of the podcast and, our reach. We had some hormone therapy labs approaching us here and there, wanting to work with us. And, we never really, we considered it a little bit, maybe, maybe not. And we interviewed a couple, and there was one that said, hey, we'll give you guys free blood tests just for the hell of it. So I said, okay. Went and got my hormones tested, and my free testosterone came back at 269. So that's under the threshold 300, right, to like 1100. 269.
You mean your total testosterone?
Total. Sorry, total testosterone.
Yeah, your free would be like a 1 point something.
Yeah. Sorry. My total testosterone. So, and that puts me like so low that a general practitioner would even probably prescribe me testosterone. And I had
mine when I started. Mine was hugging 200 too.
Yeah,
right in there. It's fucking brutal.
Yeah, it's brutal, right? And I'm like, oh, and I mean, now it's all making sense. Fuck, I'm not an anxious person, but all of a sudden, I'm like, for the last 4 years, I've been having some anxiety,
depression stuff too. Is that what gets me?
I don't have the drive I used to have. Like I used to really have a lot of drive. It's really hard, I'm disciplined, which kept me going, but it's like, man. And then of course there's the whole like, fuck, I'm a fitness and health expert. How the hell do I got my testosterone going to be low like that? And and then there's all the stigma around testosterone, all that stuff. But finally, I got through it, and I said, okay. Talked to my wife, and I'm like, the reality is my testosterone being this low is putting my health at risk. So I think I this is going to be what I'm going to have to do. So I did it, and it was, bro, it's like total game changer.
Yeah.
Total game changer. Like I'm like, energy through the roof. My body responds to my workouts. Again, my anxiety's gone. I feel like I used to. Sharper, more motivated, just generally feeling a lot better. So totally worth it. Big time game changer. And I think, if somebody gets tested and their hormones are out of whack or low, this is where Western medicine does a pretty damn good job.
Yeah.
Testosterone definitely worked for me.
Yeah, I had my blood draw today. I'm doing a Dutch test, so like spitting and all that kind of stuff, like the saliva test, piss test. I'm doing the whole thing. I'm super stoked because I did it when I tanked my endocrine system eating paleo and training my ass off early in the CrossFit world. But I had done some anabolics before, but I would do like a DECA test stack for 12 weeks, like the classic in college, and we would just, especially as a 21-year-old, 20-year-old, like doing that shit. You could we got so fucking strong.
Yeah.
It was so dumb. My neck was bigger around than my head was.
Yeah.
It was fun, but it was kind of, nothing crazy. Like did that twice or so, but I had great gains from it. But then my testosterone was fine coming off. But then I tanked my endocrine system, and my coach at the time was like, listen, man, you're at I think my free was like under 1. And then my total was like in that 200 range.
Yeah.
He was like, either you take 3 years off and just like do pro anabolic workouts and get a little fat, or you take gear. And then once you, in the CrossFit world, this is funny, people don't like to admit this. Once you take gear in the CrossFit world, you realize how many people were taking gear in the CrossFit world.
Oh, no wonder you can work out like this. Yeah.
Oh, no wonder you could train this much. Oh, and it's like, and dude, just things started to happen. I was like, you should do like 250-pound thrusters for 5 reps and shit, just like overnight. And I'm like, because I was getting no response. I was training my ass off, and it just was like, I could get a little fitter, like my aerobic capacity could get better, but like as far as strength gains, I just wasn't having them, and it wasn't making sense. And finally got that tested. And I think it's one of those things, as far as being thought criminals, it's not mainstream. It's more mainstream now than it was, but getting those hormones checked, I'm really glad you did that.
Yeah, there's a huge stigma around testosterone. It's like cannabis. Like there was a lot of propaganda around it. But the reality is, of all the hormones that you can use medicinally, right? Like let's say you got low thyroid, or you take estrogen or progesterone, insulin, testosterone. You can overdose on every hormone but testosterone. Not saying you won't get side effects. That's how safe it is, though, is all I'm saying. Like you could take 20 times your normal production of testosterone in one shot, and you're not going to die. You can't do that with insulin and other with thyroid, right? You can't do that, right? So it's very safe. It's also unhealthy. We talk about the unhealthy effects of like taking like bodybuilder doses of steroids. You got to forget that.
Well, you're running it hot if you're doing that. Like your heart has a hard time with that. Like you can prolonged exposure to that can be.
It's just a whole different ball game. It's just a lot.
Yeah, it's apples and oranges.
Yeah, bodybuilders will take 10 times the amount that you'll take.
It's like doing a key bump versus snorting an 8-ball.
Yeah,
two totally different things.
Except a certain amount of testosterone, you need to be healthy. So if it's below that, your risk of heart disease goes up, and stroke, dementia, Alzheimer's, cancer. Prostate cancer goes up with low testosterone. So you're better off. You want to be in that, in that range, but probably towards the upper part of that range, because depending on how you feel, right? It's depends on person to person. So total game changer, dude. Physically speaking, I mean, I was already so dialed that when I threw that on, and now my testosterone's normal, it was like 12 pounds of lean body mass right away, and I lost about 4 pounds of body fat doing the same shit.
It's funny how much you can tell how many more anabolic receptors men have in their upper body, because your upper body just like puffs up. Like you sit different. Like your whole body feels different. It's a really, I'm really excited about it. And I think I might get on some growth hormone peptides and stuff like that too. Play around.
Yeah. Well, do you have a good place? Because the place that we work with it's phenomenal.
I'm going through Dr. Conover. He's pretty well. I looked at your stuff too. I looked at them as well. They were, your guys were my backup, which they look phenomenal as well.
Yeah,
they do a lot talking about like tendon and joint health and collagen production. I looked at
and they're not afraid to prescribe higher doses of testosterone if the symptoms, if it's something that you need for your symptoms. They're also not afraid to prescribe, FDA approved anabolics for other, purposes. Like they'll give you nandrolone for joint pain. Very low dose, nothing like what a bodybuilder would use, but they're not afraid of that stuff. They're like beyond the stigma, beyond the whatever. Like this is what the science says, and I like that, right?
Yeah, I love that. Well, dude, this has been super fun. We're gonna cut off the public episode, but I've got a question here from the Patreon.
All right.
But you're on Mind Pump. Anything else you got going on right now? You get your book, dude.
Yeah, the book is still out, right? The Resistance Training Revolution is still out. No, we're doing the show still. We're growing really, really fast right now. So it's been
good.
It's been a lot of fun. It's really exciting. Doing a lot of stuff on YouTube, creating more workout programs. We developed an investment arm of the company that now is growing. So a lot of fun stuff.
I need to go find that old Mind Pump episode that I was on and share that just to see the difference.
That was a while ago, dude.
That was a long time ago.
That was like 5 years ago, maybe.
You guys we had a pretty mutually beneficial relationship back in the early podcast days.
Yeah.
Between On It and
oh yeah, that's right. And I think we were smoking a joint on the podcast while we were talking. Probably.
No, we microdosed LSD.
That's hilarious. Wow.
We went 4 hours.
That's hilarious.
So this 2 hours doesn't
is
seem
that
like
how,
much, but...
Wow, and that's out there. Okay, cool.
Oh, I didn't know. Is that not supposed to be a thing?
No, I mean, whatever. You know, it's a good time.
All right, dude. Thanks so much.